shadows of the Kanka stretched long under the dying sun, Arhan Sahib emerged from its ancient gates with Princess Asportia at his side, her face veiled in the silence of hard-won rescue. He spoke to her softly, his voice steady as forged steel. "We pass from here in quiet, like ghosts upon the wind." He guided her to the waiting horses, lifting her with care onto one saddle before mounting his own powerful steed. Behind them, Tamir Boga and Mustafa sat with their warriors, faces lighting with relief at the sight. "All praise to Allah," Tamir Boga murmured, his hand upon his heart. "Our Sultan has saved the Lady Asportia." Mustafa nodded, eyes shining. "Allah be thanked indeed." Joy rippled through their ranks as Arhan Sahib led the princess safely beyond the walls. Then Tamir called low, "Follow them now unseen, without raising alarm." The men moved like shadows in his wake. Further in the gathering dark, Jakarta Sahib and his warriors clashed fiercely with Yakid's soldiers, steel ringing against steel, the forest floor already slick with blood. Arhan Sahib and Asportia arrived upon that scene of fury, and there, amid the chaos, Arhan's eyes locked upon Yakid himself, fighting like a cornered wolf. "This is Yakid," Arhan growled, voice thick with righteous fire. "The very hand that murdered Burhan." He dismounted in one fluid motion, drawing his sword from its sheath with a whisper of lethal promise. Yakid's gaze found him across the fray, and a cruel smile twisted his lips. Arhan cut down the first soldier who charged him, the blade singing through flesh and bone. Yakid laughed bitterly. "Arhan, welcome. I was just telling them how sweetly Burhan fell." Arhan's eyes burned. "The fire you set was not enough to finish him, traitor. Your death is written by my hand." From behind, Tamir Boga and the others came running, breathless. "My Sultan," Tamir warned. "They heard our approach. Byzantine forces are closing, many of them." Mustafa gripped his sword tighter. "Too many, my Sultan. We must withdraw." Arhan stared hard at Yakid. "I will kill you, but not today. Live a little longer with your fear. Wait for the hour I choose." He turned to his men. "Fall back. We retreat in order." The warriors began to disengage, shields raised, while Jakarta Sahib and Fatima withdrew from the opposite flank, melting into the trees like smoke. Miles away in the Bursa Palace, Aladdin Sahib sat beside Gonya, gently pressing medicine to her lips. "For the love of God, open your eyes," he whispered, voice cracking with desperation. "The draft should have taken hold by now." He looked to Iraj. "Did she take any other medicine, or eat or drink before the birth?" Iraj shook her head. "No, Vizier, not even water." Aladdin's face tightened with worry. He leaned closer to his wife. "Gonya, my beloved, for Allah's sake, open your eyes." The newborn cried ceaselessly in Malhoun's arms. "Oh, my lord," Malhoun prayed, rocking the child, "grant this mother her infant. The baby hungers, milk must flow soon." Nilafar stood nearby. "My sister will awaken, she must." Aladdin wept openly now. "Our child is hungry, my wife, come back to us. For Allah's sake, return." Minutes stretched like hours until Gonya's eyelids fluttered. Iraj breathed thanks. "Praise be to Allah." Malhoun's face brightened with joy. Gonya stirred, voice weak. "My child." Aladdin lifted the infant carefully. "Our offspring is safe, my beloved Gonya. Look, our son is well." Gonya rose with effort, taking the baby into her arms, cradling him against her heart. "My little one, how beautiful you are." Malhoun smiled through tears. "The danger has passed. May our Lord never separate you two. Amin." Nilafar embraced her sister. "Congratulations, my sister." The women withdrew, leaving husband and wife in tender quiet. Aladdin raised his hands. "All praise and thanks belong to you alone, my lord." Gonya looked at the crying infant. "Aladdin, he weeps without cease. Has something happened? What are you hiding from me? Tell me the truth." He stroked her hair. "He is only hungry, my love." She managed a faint smile. "He takes after his father, then." Aladdin chuckled softly. "Exactly like me." Gonya's voice trembled with both joy and fear. "I am so happy, Aladdin, so very happy, yet terror grips me. What if harm comes to him?" He held her closer. "Nothing will touch him. All will be well. Allah has blessed us with this son in this world, and he will unite us with our daughter in the hereafter." Imperial halls of Constantinople, Shahanshah approached the slain soldiers, fury etching deep lines upon his face. "Who did this? Bring him before me." Damir Khan arrived swiftly. "The one responsible took his lady, Princess Asportia, and fled not long ago." Andronikos's eyes narrowed. "It was Arhan, then." Shahanshah nodded grimly. Mahmud added, he came to abduct your grandfather. Andronikos clenched his fists. I had both of them in my grasp. Shahanshah's voice turned cold. This is Arhen, the fox disguised in wolf's clothing. Despina stepped forward. We will make him pay the full price. Damia Khan pressed. Our alliance must hold, the one sworn when your son was born. The young prince declared, the fleets of Rome now answer to me. Your ships will cease their raids upon my vessels. The rest, as you said, will be simple. Damia Khan leaned in. One condition, help me reclaim Charlie. Andronikos smiled thinly. Worry not. Not an inch of land will remain for Arhen. Even the Pope's support rides with us now. Come, let us greet Cardinal with open arms. Shahanshah and Mahmud exchanged triumphant glances. The Pope stands with us. No Arhen, no Ottomans left standing. Damia Khan's eyes gleamed with dark satisfaction. The next morning in the bustling markets of Constantinople, a woman moved carefully among the stalls, selecting fruits with practiced hands. Suddenly, a whistle pierced the air. Daphne approached from behind. The woman startled. You! Daphne smiled with predatory calm. It has been a long time, has it not? Valeria's face paled. How did you find me? Daphne's voice dripped menace. Do not underestimate me, Valeria. That would be an insult. At those words, Valeria overturned a vegetable cart in panic and fled through the crowded lanes. Daphne gave chase. Foolish woman. Valeria ran desperately, weaving between merchants and buyers, heart pounding like war drums. She burst into her home where her daughter waited. We are leaving, my child. We cannot stay here any longer. Come, the girl protested. I do not want to. There is no time, Valeria urged, pulling her toward the door. But Daphne blocked the exit, tall and unyielding. Your mother speaks truth, little fairy. We are going. It is time you met your father. Is that not right? Valeria's face twisted with terror as the walls of her hidden life closed in. In the forest, Arhan Sahib's column halted as night fell. We camp here until dawn, he commanded. Prepare the fires. Jakarta directed the soldiers. Light the flames, men. We rest in this place. While the camp took shape, Arhan led a sporcher aside, away from prying ears. His voice was low, heavy with command and pain. What did I tell you the day you entered the palace? Every step you take shall mirror Sultan Arhan's. Every action shall represent me and my house. What have you done? Running from the palace. What madness possessed you? A sporcher met his gaze. I did not run. I went to my father. You fled, he countered. You entered enemy lands without word. What else is that called? I told them, she insisted. I told your mother, I told the guards. No one granted permission. My father sat imprisoned while I waited helpless in the palace. Arhin's jaw tightened. You should have waited for me, informed me. A sporcher's voice rose with defiance and sorrow. I warned you from the beginning. I will not be a woman who sits behind walls waiting. I will not live begging permission for every breath. Arhin stepped closer. And who am I, a sporcher? I am your husband, she answered, and I remain a Byzantine princess. These are my lands. No longer, he declared, the words cutting like his blade. You are a sporcher Khartan, wife of Sultan Arhan. You belong to the Ottoman house now. His tone softened only slightly. You thought only of your own risk, yet you have placed me in peril. If they had captured you, what then? A sporcher's eyes filled with regret. I thought only of my father's life. I married my enemy for Rome and for him. Arhan shook his head. That is the problem. You still see yourself as Princessa Sporcher. You still see me as your foe. You act alone and feel alone. You do not trust me, she challenged him. As if you trust me. You placed a sword between us in our bed and turned your back upon your enemy. Arhan's voice grew raw with memory. I trusted you enough to bring you into my home, to share my life and my bed. I opened my house to you, yet your actions have pushed me out the door. He exhaled slowly. Fear not. I will not abandon your father. I will save him. Tears slipped down a sporcher's cheeks. Arhen, I never wanted this. Forgive me. I only wished to save my father's life. He looked at her long, the firelight painting their faces in gold and shadow. You came to save your father. I came to save my wife. You have lived alone too long, but that time ends today. Any step you take with me. Any battle you join at my side. If death comes, it comes for us together. Learn now what it means to be a sporcher Khartan, wife of Sultan Arhan. With those words he turned and strode back toward the camp, leaving her standing beneath the ancient trees. tears tracing silent paths as the weight of oaths and divided loyalties pressed upon her heart. Far to the north, Burhan Faladios moved like a storm through the hills, his elite riders cutting supply lines to the Byzantine outposts. "We encircle them," he ordered. "Starve their fortresses. Let fear do half our work." Smoke rose in distant columns where his men had burned enemy granaries. Turhin, ever loyal at Urhin's right, led a lightning charge against a relief column, arrows whistling past him as he intercepted them with masterful swordwork, turning the road into a graveyard of broken banners. "For Urhin Sahib," he roared, his blade flashing. In the heart of the conflict, Faladios finally met Yakid upon a ridge bathed in firelight. The two rivals circled, swords drawn, smoke curling around them like living serpents. "You betrayed everything," Faladios spat. "Your name will rot." Yakid laughed through bloodied teeth. "Loyalty is for fools. Power is the only truth." Their blades clashed in a frenzy of sparks and ringing steel. Faladios pressed forward with relentless fury, each strike carrying the memory of fallen brothers. Yakid parried desperately, but Faladios feinted, then drove his sword deep. Yakid staggered, eyes wide with shock and the bitter taste of consequence. "This is not the end," he gasped, collapsing amid the flames. Faladios stood over him. "It is for you." Chaos swallowed the ridge as fire spread through dry underbrush, turning night into a blazing inferno that lit the path of retreat and pursuit alike. Yet even as victory kissed their blades, scouts brought grim tidings. Shahanshah's forces were mobilizing in greater numbers, alliances shifting like desert sands. Urhan Sahib stood upon a hill overlooking the glowing horizon, a sporcher beside him now in uneasy silence, the newborn cries of distant Bursa echoing in his mind like prayers unanswered. Tamir Boga approached. "My Sultan," fresh riders approached from the east. Damir Khan's men joined with Byzantine steel. Urhan's grip tightened on his sword. "Then we march at first light. Let them come. We will meet betrayal with fire of our own." The camp stirred with purpose, horses stamping, swords sharpened, while in the shadows a single messenger slipped away toward Constantinople, carrying words that could unravel everything. The war, like the night itself, was far from over. As the first pale light of dawn pierced the forest canopy like a divine blade, Urhan Sahib stood upon the ridge, his cloak heavy with dew and the scent of last night's fires still clinging to the air. The camp stirred with quiet purpose, horses saddled, weapons checked, eyes sharp with the knowledge that sleep had been a fragile mercy. A sporcher sat nearby upon a fallen log, her hands folded tightly. The tears of the previous night dried upon her cheeks, but the storm within her far from settled. Urhan turned to her, his voice low yet carrying the weight of command. "Today we ride hard. Every moment wasted is a gift to our enemies. Stay close. Your place is at my side, not ahead of it." She nodded silently, the conflict between princess and wife still burning behind her eyes. Tamir Boga approached, wiping the blade of his axe. "My Sultan, the men are ready. Jakarta Sahib reports the eastern trail is clear for now, but smoke rises from the valleys beyond. The Byzantines are burning fields to deny us forage." Urhan's jaw tightened. "Then we cut their supply lines in return. Turhan, take 50 riders and swing wide through the gorge. Strike their wagons before they reinforce the main column. Let them taste hunger while we feast on their fear." Turhan bowed, his elite frame already coiled like a panther. "As you command, my Sultan. Arrows will find their marks before they even draw breath." He mounted swiftly and led his detachment into the mist, disappearing like vengeance given form. Further back in the column, Fatima rode beside Jakarta Sahib, her face marked by the exhaustion of battle, yet her spirit unbroken. "The traitor Yakid is dead, but his shadow lingers. His men will scatter or seek new masters." Jakarta spat upon the ground. "Let them run. Broken loyalty spreads faster than plague. When word reaches Shahanshah that his dog has fallen by Faladios's blade, despair will bloom in their hearts." Miles away, in the smoke-filled aftermath of the ridge, Burhan Faladios cleaned his sword beside the still smouldering body of Yakid. The fire had spread wildly during their duel, consuming trees and undergrowth alike, turning the night into a roaring inferno that forced both sides to retreat. Faladios stared down at the traitor's lifeless eyes. "You spoke of power. yet died like a common dog. This is the price of betrayal. He mounted his horse and rejoined the main force, his presence radiating grim satisfaction. Yet even victory carried its shadow. Scouts reported fresh Byzantine banners moving south, reinforced by Damir Khan's opportunistic warriors. In the distant Bursa palace, the air was thick with the scent of incense and new life. Aladdin Sahib cradled his newborn son while Gonya rested against pillows, her face still pale but her eyes bright with fragile joy. The infant suckled hungrily as Malhoun and Nilafar watched with quiet prayers. He grows stronger with every breath, Aladdin whispered, brushing a gentle hand across his wife's forehead. Gonya smiled weakly. Yet I sense trouble beyond these walls. You hide it from me, my husband, but a mother's heart feels the storm. Aladdin's expression darkened. Urhen fights on multiple fronts. The Byzantines gather like wolves, and whispers speak of papal banners joining their cause, but we will not break. This child is our hope, proof that Allah grants light even in darkness. He leaned closer. Rest now. I must meet with Abdul Rahman and Altadin Sahib. The defences of Bursa cannot falter. Back in the forest march, Urhen's column pressed forward under sky heavy with gathering clouds. Mustafa rode up beside him. My Sultan, riders approach from the west, our own scouts, and they ride as if death itself pursues them. The scouts reined in hard, horses lathered. Shahanshah has unleashed his full wrath. Damir Khan has delivered Charlie as promised, and in return, Byzantine heavy cavalry now marches with them. They seek to encircle us near the old pass, cutting us off from Bursa. Urhen's eyes flashed with strategic fire. Then we do not run into their trap. We become the jaws that close around them. Send word to Turhen, tell him to feign retreat along the gorge, drawing their cavalry deep. Faladios will strike from the high ground with fire arrows. We turn their encirclement against them. A Sporcher rode closer, her voice trembling yet resolute. Urhen, my father is still their prisoner. If we fight like this, they may kill him in rage. Urhen looked at her, the weight of their earlier confrontation still fresh. I have sworn to save him, but not at the cost of my people. Trust must flow both ways, a Sporcher Katan. Your father's life is tied to our victory, not our hesitation. She lowered her gaze, the lesson of shared fate sinking deeper into her soul. As the sun climbed higher, the trap unfolded with brutal precision. Turhen's detachment galloped openly along the narrow gorge, shouting challenges, drawing the Byzantine cavalry into furious pursuit. Hooves thundered like war drums. Then, from the ridges above, Burhan Faladios unleashed chaos. Now, he roared. Dozens of fire arrows streaked downward like falling stars, striking wagons and dry brush alike. Flames erupted violently, smoke billowing thick and black, choking horses and blinding riders. Panic spread through the enemy ranks as horses reared and men screamed. Turhan wheeled his force around in perfect discipline, charging back into the smoke-filled gorge. His sword flashed, intercepting arrows meant for his men, cutting down officers with merciless efficiency. For Urhen Sahib, for the house of Osman. Heart of the melee, a Byzantine captain, loyal to Shahanshah, faced Faladios directly. Their duel was savage, blades clashing amid swirling smoke and leaping flames. Your sultan is finished, the captain bellowed. Faladios laughed darkly. Then come take his head if you can survive mine, Steel sang. Faladios parried, feinted low, then drove his shoulder into the man, knocking him from his saddle. Before the captain could rise, Faladios's blade found his throat. Blood sprayed across the burning earth. The psychological blow landed hard. The sight of their commander falling in flames broke the enemy's will. Many threw down weapons, begging quarter, while others fled into the trees, only to be hunted by Urhen's advancing main force. Urhen himself led the decisive charge, a Sporcher riding just behind under the protection of Mustafa and Tamir Boga. His sword rose and fell like judgment itself. Allah is with us, he cried, voice carrying over the roar of battle. Smoke and fire turned the gorge into a vision of hell, yet through it the Ottoman warriors moved with divine purpose. Enemy banners burned. Supply wagons collapsed in ruin. Shahanshah's carefully woven encirclement lay shattered. Yet as the dust and smoke began to settle, a captured Byzantine officer was dragged before Urhen. Bloodied and defiant, the man sneered. You celebrate too soon, Sultan of Wolves. While you fight here, your precious Bursa grows vulnerable. And in Constantinople, Shahanshah prepares a gift for you, your own blood turned against you. Arhan pressed his blade to the man's neck. Speak clearly or die choking on your lies. The officer laughed weakly. Damia Khan has found the perfect blade. Someone close to your house. Even now, poison spreads in whispers. Before Arhan could press further, an arrow whistled from the trees, striking the officer dead. Hidden archers. Ambush within victory. Tarhan shouted warning as fresh riders, mixed Byzantine and turncoat forces, poured from the eastern ridge. They were waiting for this moment. Arhan wheeled his horse, eyes scanning the chaos. Form ranks, we break them here. A sporcher drew a small dagger, her face set with new resolve, ready to fight beside him at last. But in the distance, a lone rider broke away from the enemy line, carrying a sealed message toward Constantinople at breakneck speed. Palladios noticed and gave chase, but the rider vanished into the smoke. Night fell once more upon the blood-soaked gorge. Campfires burned low as Arhan's warriors tended wounds and counted the cost of victory. A sporcher sat beside her husband, the day's battles having forged something new between them. I fought today, she whispered. Not as princess, but as your wife. Arhan nodded, though his mind remained heavy. Good, but greater tests await. The traitor within our walls may be closer than we fear. Miles away in Constantinople, Shahanshah paced furiously before Andronikos and Damia Khan. They turned our trap into their glory. Yaki dead, supplies lost. What now? Damia Khan smiled coldly. Now we strike where it truly hurts. The messenger has been sent. When the blade falls, Arhan will bleed from within. Andronikos raised a goblet, and the Pope's blessing ensures no one will question our holy war. Deep in the Bursa Palace, as Aladdin Sahib prepared reinforcements, a shadowed figure slipped through the corridors carrying a vial of poison and whispered promises of power. The infant cried once more in the distance, as if sensing the gathering darkness. Arhan Sahib rose beneath the stars, gripping his sword, staring toward the unseen horizon. We march for Bursa at first light. Whatever betrayal awaits, we will meet it with fire and faith. Yet unknown to him, the rider from the gorge had already delivered his message, and in the heart of his own camp, one trusted captain's eyes gleamed with treacherous ambition as he read the sealed orders by firelight. The war was not ending. It was only beginning to devour its own. As the stars wheeled slowly overhead, and the gorge still reeked of smoke and death, Arhan Sahib stood alone upon a blackened ridge, his silhouette carved against the flickering campfires below. The victory had been costly. Wounded men groaned in the shadows, while healers moved among them with prayers and bandages. A sporcher approached quietly, her cloak drawn tight, the small dagger still clutched in her hand, as if it had become part of her now. You were right, she said softly, voice barely above the crackle of flames. Fighting beside you, it changes everything. Arhan turned, his face etched with exhaustion and quiet pride. Then learn faster, a sporcher Khartan. The road to Bursa is long, and every shadow may hide a blade meant for us. He placed a hand upon her shoulder. Sleep little tonight. Tomorrow we ride before dawn. Tamia Boga and Mustafa approached, faces grim. My Sultan, Tamia reported, Palladios has returned. The rider escaped, but we found tracks leading east, straight toward Constantinople. Whoever sent him knows our strength and our path, Mustafa added. The men whisper of betrayal. Some captains grow restless. They fear the Pope's shadow more than Byzantine steel. Arhan's eyes narrowed. Then we feed their courage with action. Cut every supply line between here and the Marmara. Burn their outposts so the smoke itself carries our warning. The Osmanli lion wakes. He summoned Jakarta Sahib. Take your warriors north. Feign weakness. Let them believe we are broken. When they rush to claim easy glory, close the trap and send their heads back on pikes. Let fear travel faster than horses. Deep in the night, Burhan Falladio sat sharpening his blade beside a low fire, the memory of Yakid's dying face still fresh. Turhan joined him, wiping dried blood from his gauntlets. The traitor died well enough for a dog, Turhan said. Falladio smiled coldly. He died screaming inside. That is enough for now. Their conversation was interrupted by scouts bringing a captured messenger wearing Damia Khan's colors. The man was thrown before Arhan. Speak, Arhen commanded, pressing steel to the captive's throat. The messenger laughed through broken teeth. You think you won today? While you play in the forests, poison blooms in Bursa. Your brother's new son may not see his second sunrise. Arhen struck him hard. Lies will not save you. Yet the man's eyes held no fear, only the cold certainty of those who serve greater shadows. Before more could be drawn from him, an arrow hissed from the darkness and buried itself in his chest. Hidden archers again. Chaos erupted as Turhan and Phaladios charged into the trees, blades flashing, killing two assassins in brutal close combat while the third slipped away like smoke. Urhin turned to a sporcher, his voice urgent. You ride with the vanguard tomorrow, no arguments. If death comes for my house, it will find us together. She met his gaze without flinching. Then I will not wait behind walls again. Far to the south in Bursa, tension thickened the palace air like incense gone sour. Aladdin Sahib paced the chamber where Gonya rested with their newborn son. The infant's cries had quieted, but a strange unease lingered. Malhoun tasted the milk first, as custom demanded, then handed the child to his mother. He feeds well, she said, forcing a smile, yet Iraj entered swiftly, face pale. Vizier, a servant, was found dead near the kitchens, foam at the mouth. Poison. Aladdin's hand flew to his sword. Double the guards. No one enters or leaves without my word. Abdul Rahman, Altadin Sahib, secure the gates. If they strike at my son, they will drown in their own blood. Gonya clutched the baby tighter. Who would do this, Aladdin? While Urhan fights for all of us, he kissed her forehead. The same serpents who smile in Constantinople, but Allah is our shield. This child will live to see our banners fly over new lands. In Constantinople, Shahanshah slammed his fist upon the marble table, maps scattering. Urhin turns every trap into triumph. Yakid slain, our cavalry burned in their own smoke. Andronikos leaned back, eyes calculating. Patience, ally. The internal blade cuts deepest. Damir Khan's man is already inside Bursa. One drop in the right cup and the Ottoman house fractures. Damir Khan smiled like a jackal. My agent is close to Aladdin's inner circle. When the child dies, grief will make them reckless. Then we strike Bursa while Urhin is still marching. Despina added coldly, and the girl Valeria has been brought back. Her daughter will prove useful leverage. Shahanshah exhaled. The Pope's emissaries arrive tomorrow. With their blessing, we frame this as holy war, no mercy for the followers of the Prophet. The next dawn broke red as blood. Urhin Sahib's full force moved like a steel river through the hills, Turhan leading the vanguard, intercepting Byzantine scouts with deadly precision, his sword flashing as he cut down 3 riders single-handedly, arrows deflected by his spinning blade. Phaladios commanded the rearguard, burning every bridge they crossed so no pursuit could follow easily. Let them starve chasing ghosts, he growled, as flames roared behind them. By midday they reached the outskirts of a strategic village controlling the road to Bursa. Enemy forces had fortified it hastily, banners of Shahanshah and Damir Khan flapping in the wind. Urhin raised his hand. We do not siege blindly. Encircle them. Cut water first, then food. Let thirst break their spirit before steel touches flesh. Tamir Boga led one wing through the eastern orchards, while Mustafa took the west. Smoke soon rose as Ottoman archers set fire to the outer granaries. Screams echoed. Women and children were allowed to flee, psychological mercy that spread terror among the defenders. See how the Sultan wages war. Even his mercy is a weapon. Inside the village, a desperate Byzantine commander rallied his men. Hold! Reinforcements come. But as afternoon burned into evening, Urhin gave the signal. The assault was ferocious. Turhan charged the main gate, leaping from his horse to scale the barricade, sword singing as he dueled the enemy captain in a whirlwind of steel and sparks. Your emperor sends you to die for nothing, Turhan roared, parrying a heavy blow before driving his blade through the man's chest. The gate fell. Chaos swallowed the streets, fire leaping from roof to roof, smoke blinding friend and foe alike. Phaladios fought like a demon in the central square, cutting down a group of Damir Khan's mercenaries who tried to flank them. Betrayers die twice, once in body, once in memory, he shouted. Urhin rode through the heart of the battle with a sporcher close behind, protected yet participating, her small blade drawing blood when a desperate soldier lunged at her. For the first time she felt the weight and glory of standing as Ottoman. "Arhen," she called, warning him of an archer. He spun, arrow intercepted by his shield. Their eyes met amid the inferno. Husband and wife forged stronger in fire. As night claimed the village, the last pockets of resistance surrendered. Arhen stood among the captured banners, now burning in a great pyre. "Send word to Bursa, we come with victory and strength." Yet as scouts returned, one brought grave news, voice low. "My sultan, a poisoned servant was found in the palace. The child lives, but a lordin tightens the noose. Someone inside our own house feeds information to the enemy." Arhen's face darkened like storm clouds. He looked at his captains, loyal faces all, yet doubt now gnawed. A sporcher stepped close. Trust must flow both ways, even now. Before he could answer, a lone rider galloped into camp, bloodied and near collapse. "My sultan, Bursa is under sudden attack from within. The gates have been opened by treachery. Damir Khan's men pour through the southern quarter." Flames roared higher behind Arhen as he mounted his horse, sword raised high. "We ride through the night, to Bursa, every man. Allah grant us wings." The entire force surged forward, horses thundering like judgment itself. A sporcher rode beside him, no longer asking permission. In the distance, the horizon glowed with new fires, the fires of home under siege. And somewhere in that chaos, a trusted face waited with a knife meant for a lordin's heart and the infant's cradle. The war had come home, and the greatest betrayal was yet to reveal its face. As the moon climbed high and the forest paths turned silver under its cold gaze, Arhen Saheb led his warriors in a relentless night march toward Bursa. Hooves thundered like distant thunder across the valleys. No fires were lit, no songs were sung, only the grim determination of men riding to save their home. A sporcher rode at his right hand now, no longer a sheltered princess, but a woman tempered by smoke and steel, her cloak whipping in the wind. "If they have touched your brother's child," she said, voice steady, "I will stand with you until the last traitor falls." Arhen glanced at her, the fire of shared purpose burning between them. "Then stay alive, a sporcher Khartan. Tonight the house of Osman either stands united or bleeds from within." Tarhan galloped at the vanguard, his sharp eyes piercing the darkness, intercepting stray enemy scouts with silent, deadly efficiency. 3 times his blade flashed, ending lives before alarms could be raised. Faladios commanded the flank, his face a mask of controlled fury. "They dare strike our cradle while we fight their dogs in the field," he growled to Jakarta Sahib. "When I find the traitor, his death will be slow enough for the whole city to learn the price of broken oaths." Miles ahead, Bursa burned in pockets of chaos. In the palace, a Lordin Sahib moved like a lion defending its cub. Swords clashed in the outer corridors as Damir Khan's infiltrators, aided by a treacherous captain whose name had once been trusted, Killil, had opened a lesser gate under cover of night. Abdul Rahman fought fiercely at the main hall, his axe cleaving through 2 mercenaries. "Hold the line," he roared, "for the Sultan and his blood." Altadin Sahib guarded the inner chambers, his sword red to the hilt. Gonya clutched their newborn son in a hidden alcove, Malhoun and Nilafar beside her with daggers drawn. The baby's cries pierced the night. "Allah protect us," Gonya whispered, tears streaming as distant flames lit the windows. Alordin burst into the nursery wing just as Killil, the betrayer, appeared with 5 armed men. "You," Alordin's voice cracked with rage and pain. "I raised you like a brother." Killil's face twisted with ambition and fear. "The future belongs to those who choose the winning side, Vizier. Shahanshah offers gold and lands. Arhen's time ends tonight." Their blades met in a savage duel. Steel rang against steel, sparks flying in the torchlit hall. Alordin pressed forward with righteous fury, driving Killil back step by step. "You would murder an infant for gold," Killil laughed bitterly. "Better an infant than watch your house fall to Byzantium." He lunged, but Alordin parried, then countered with a deep cut across the traitor's shoulder. Blood sprayed. Yet Killil's men charged, forcing Alordin to fight multiple blades at once. Outside the palace walls, Arhen's force arrived like a storm from the darkness. "To the gates," Arhen commanded, voice thundering. "Tarhen, take the southern quarter. Faladios, clear the eastern streets. Burn their retreat." The city erupted into fresh battle. Smoke rose thick and choking as Ottoman warriors set fire to enemy barricades. Chaos swallowed the streets, horses screaming, men shouting oaths to Allah and to forgotten saints, steel clashing in every shadow. Tamir Boga led a ferocious charge through the market square, his axe splitting shields and helmets alike. Mustafa fought beside him, protecting the flanks. "Push them toward the river," Mustafa shouted. "Let the water run red." Arhen himself stormed toward the palace with a sporcher and a hand-picked guard. An arrow whistled past his head. A sporcher cried warning and he ducked, then cut down the archer with a single powerful stroke. "Stay behind me, but not cowering," he told her. She nodded, gripping her dagger, and moments later drove it into the arm of a mercenary who tried to drag her from the saddle. The man howled and fell. For the first time, her blade drew enemy blood in defense of her new home. Inside the palace, Alauddin dueled Killil with growing fury. The traitor was skilled, but guilt and desperation made him wild. "You opened our gates," Alauddin roared, smashing aside a weak parry and driving his sword into Killil's thigh. The betrayer dropped to one knee, gasping. "Damir Khan promised me command. He promised." Alauddin raised his blade for the killing blow. "Your promises end here." But before the strike landed, two more infiltrators rushed in. Killil crawled away, bleeding, as Alauddin turned to face the new threat. Swords clashed in a whirlwind. One man fell screaming, the other wounded Alauddin's side before Abdul Rahman arrived and finished him with a brutal axe blow. Arhen reached the palace gates amid swirling smoke and leaping flames. "Break it down," he ordered. Tarhen and his elite warriors smashed through the weakened barrier. Inside, they found hell, bodies of loyal guards strewn across marble floors now slick with blood. Arhen's roar echoed through the halls. "Alauddin, brother!" He charged deeper, cutting down three mercenaries in rapid succession, his blade moving like divine justice. A sporcher fought at his flank, her movements raw but determined, earning respect from the warriors around her. In the grand hall, Palladios finally caught Killil attempting to flee toward a hidden passage. "Traitor!" Palladios bellowed. The two men faced each other in the firelit chamber, smoke curling around them like judgment. Killil raised his bloodied sword. "You are all doomed. The Pope's armies march. Damir Khan has already." Palladios did not let him finish. Their duel was ferocious, blades singing a deadly song. Palladios attacked with unrelenting power, each strike carrying the weight of betrayed brotherhood. Killil parried desperately, but Palladios feinted high, then swept low, severing the traitor's sword hand. Killil screamed. Palladios grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against a pillar. "Look into my eyes as you die. This is the fate of all who betray Arhan Sahib." With a final thrust, he ended the traitor's life. Killil slid to the floor, eyes wide in eternal regret. Arhen burst into the inner chamber moments later and found Alauddin leaning against a wall, wounded but alive, Gonya and the baby safe behind him. The brothers embraced fiercely. "The child lives?" Arhen asked. Alauddin nodded, voice hoarse. "By Allah's mercy. But the poison, we lost 3 servants. Killil was the serpent." A sporcher entered, breathing hard, and went immediately to Gonya's side, helping tend the infant. For a brief moment, amid the smoke and distant shouts of victory in the streets, the family stood together. Yet the night was not finished with them. Tamir Boga arrived, face grave. "My Sultan, we have cleared most of the city, but a large Byzantine force under Damir Khan's banner approaches from the west. They timed this perfectly, hopping to catch us weakened." Mustafa added, "And scouts report Shahanshah himself rides with them, carrying papal banners. They mean to end this war at Bursa's walls." Arhan stepped out onto the palace balcony overlooking the burning city, fires reflected in his eyes. The streets below still echoed with the last clashes as his warriors hunted down remaining traitors. He raised his sword high. "We have crushed the snake within. Now we face the wolves at the gate, prepare the defenses. Cut their supplies before they even pitch camp. Tarhan, fortify the western approaches. Palladios, ready fire ships on the river. We will make them regret every step toward these walls." A sporcher stood beside him, the night wind whipping her hair. "Together," she said quietly. He nodded. "Together." As dawn approached, painting the sky in hues of blood and gold, the first enemy banners appeared on the horizon, a vast host stretching like a dark sea. Shahanshah's forces had arrived faster than expected, reinforced by fresh troops and the treacherous promises of Damir Khan. In the enemy camp, Shahanshah smiled thinly at Andronikos. Arhen is here. Good. Let him watch his city burn as we tighten the noose. Damir Khan added, and we still have one final card. Valeria's daughter now rests in our hands. Blood calls to blood. Inside Bursa, Arhan Sahib watched the approaching storm. His captains gathered around him. The city licked its wounds, smoke still rising, but the spirit of its people burned brighter than any fire. Yet as preparations for siege began in earnest, walls strengthened, supplies counted, prayers rising to the heavens, a single messenger slipped through the lines under flag of truce. He carried a sealed letter bearing the imperial seal. Arhan broke it open and read in silence. His face darkened like gathering thunder. The letter spoke of a final offer, and a threat so personal it struck deeper than any blade. A sporcher saw the change in him and stepped closer. What does it say? Arhen folded the parchment slowly, eyes fixed on the enemy encampment. They claim to hold something more valuable than walls or gold, and they demand you return to them, or the child will not see another moon. The siege of Bursa had begun. Fires burned on both sides. Smoke veiled the future. And somewhere in the vast enemy host, a new betrayal stirred, closer than any of them yet realized, as one shadow among the Ottoman captains lowered his head, hiding fresh instructions received in the chaos of the night. The war had come home, and it hungered for everything they held dear. As the blood-red dawn gave way to a merciless sun, the siege of Bursa settled over the city like a shroud of iron and smoke. Arhan Sahib stood upon the western ramparts, the enemy letter still clenched in his fist, its words burning deeper than any flame. Shahanshah's demand echoed in his mind. Return a sporcher or watch the infant ere die by unseen poison. Around him, the horizon crawled with hostile banners, Byzantine steel gleaming beside Damir Khan's treacherous hosts, papal crosses fluttering in the wind as if heaven itself had been bribed. Arhen crushed the parchment and let the pieces fall. They threaten my blood and my wife, he said, voice low and terrible. They will receive only fire and grave. A sporcher stood beside him, cloaked against the morning chill, her face pale yet resolute. I will not go back to them, not as tribute, not as sacrifice. Arhen turned to her, eyes fierce with protection and hard-won trust. You are no longer theirs to claim. You are Ottoman, you are mine, and today we teach them what it costs to threaten my house. He raised his voice across the walls. Tarhen, strengthen every gate. Phaladios, position the fire-throwers along the river. Tamir Boga, take archers to the high towers. Let their first assault break upon our walls like waves upon rock. Below, the city moved with urgent purpose. Blacksmiths hammered without rest. Women carried water and arrows to the battlements. In the palace, Alauddin Sahib held his newborn son close while Gonya prayed beside him, Malhoun and Nilafar tending the wounded. They will not touch him, Alauddin vowed, kissing the child's forehead. Allah is our protector. Let the enemy come. We shall greet them with steel and faith. Yet even in this moment of unity, shadows stirred. One captain, Zarkan, lingered too long near the messengers, his eyes darting as he slipped a small sealed note into his sleeve. Fresh instructions from Damir Khan's agents, promising power if the city fell from within. Outside the walls, Shahanshah rode before his vast host, Andronikos and Damir Khan at his side. Arhen thinks himself a lion, Shahanshah sneered. Today we starve him, cut the aqueducts, burn the outer fields, let thirst and hunger soften their pride before we storm the gates. Damir Khan smiled thinly. And the girl Valeria's daughter remains our hidden blade. When the moment comes, blood will call to blood inside their own palace. Andronikos added coldly, the Pope's blessing grants us holy fire. Burn their mosques. Let the world see the cross triumph. The first assault came before noon. Byzantine siege towers rolled forward under covering volleys of arrows. Arhen watched from the walls unmoved. Hold, he commanded. Let them taste our patience. As the towers neared, Phaladios gave the signal. Great pots of pitch and oil were hurled down, followed by flaming arrows. The towers erupted in roaring infernos. Smoke billowed thick and black, choking the attackers as men screamed and leaped from burning platforms. Tarhan led a lightning counter-sortie through a side gate, his elite swordsmen crashing into the disoriented enemy like wolves among sheep. His blade danced, intercepting arrows meant for his brothers, cutting down 3 officers in rapid succession. "For Arhan Saheb," he roared, voice rising above the chaos. "For Bursa." In the thick of the smoke, Barhan Faladios met a hulking Byzantine champion in single combat upon the scorched field. The man was massive, wielding a heavy mace blessed by papal priests. "Your sultan's whore will be returned to us," the champion bellowed. Faladios' eyes blazed with holy wrath. "Blaspheme again, and I will send your soul screaming to your false god." Their duel was brutal, mace crashing against sword, sparks flying amid swirling smoke and leaping flames. Faladios dodged a crushing blow, rolled beneath the swing, and rose like vengeance itself. His blade struck true, opening the champion's side. The giant staggered. Faladios pressed forward, relentless, until his final thrust pierced the man's heart. The Byzantine lines wavered at the sight, morale cracking under the weight of witnessed defeat. Arhen himself descended with a company of riders, a sporcher refusing to remain behind. Together they struck the enemy flank. Her horse surged beside his as she fought with growing skill, dagger flashing when a soldier tried to seize her reins. Arhen cut down the man with a single stroke. "Stay close," he shouted. "Your courage honors our house." For a moment amid the madness, husband and wife fought as one, steel, faith, and shared fate binding them tighter than any marriage vow. Yet the day's blood was not enough for the enemy. As evening approached and the first assault broke, Shahanshah ordered the aqueducts destroyed. Water ceased to flow into the city. Thirst would soon become their silent killer. Inside Bursa, Arhen gathered his captains in the palace war room. "We ration water strictly. Send raiding parties tonight to seize their supply wagons. Psychological warfare begins now. Let captured soldiers live long enough to carry tales of our unbreakable spirit back to their camp." Tamir Boga nodded. "We will make them fear the night." But as the meeting ended, Zarkan slipped away into the shadows. In a quiet corner of the stables, he met a hooded figure, Damir Khan's spy. "The child's milk will be tainted tomorrow night," Zarkan whispered. "When Arhen rides out to break the siege, I will open the eastern postern gate." The spy pressed a pouch of gold into his hand. "Damir Khan rewards loyalty well. Fail, and your family dies screaming." That same night, under cover of darkness, Arhen led a daring raid. Tarhan and Faladios moved like ghosts through the enemy lines. They struck a major supply camp, setting wagons ablaze in a towering inferno that lit the sky for miles. Chaos erupted, horses stamping, men running in panic. Arhan fought at the heart of it, sword rising and falling, his war cry carrying across the battlefield. "Aliyu Akbar, the Osmanli do not bow." Smoke and fire turned the night into a vision of judgment. They returned with precious water barrels and captured grain, yet the cost was heavy. Good men lay dead upon the field. Back in the palace, a sporcher helped tend the wounded while Gonya sang soft prayers to the restless infant. "They will not break us," a sporcher said quietly, though fear for the child gnawed at her heart. A Lorden placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are truly one of us now. May Allah preserve our unity." As midnight deepened, Arhen stood once more upon the walls, staring at the distant enemy fires. A lone rider approached under flag of truce, carrying another message. Arhen read it in silence. This time the threat was clearer. One more refusal, and Valeria's daughter, revealed now as a sporcher's hidden sister, would be executed publicly before the walls at dawn, followed by slow poison delivered through the city's remaining wells. Arhen's grip tightened on the parchment until his knuckles whitened. A sporcher approached, sensing the new darkness in his eyes. "What fresh poison do they send?" she asked. Before he could answer, a scream echoed from the palace corridors. A servant had collapsed, foaming at the mouth. The second poisoning had begun. Tarhan rushed in. "My sultan, Zarkan, has vanished. His quarters are empty." Faladios drew his sword. "Treachery still lives among us." Arhen turned toward the enemy camp, where drums now beat ominously and torches moved in formation. The siege tightened like a noose. Fires raged on the horizon. Smoke veiled the stars. And somewhere inside the city walls, the traitor prepared to open the gates while an innocent child's life hung by the thinnest thread of fate. The dawn would bring either deliverance or ruin. Arhan Sahib raised his sword toward the heavens. "O Allah, grant us strength. The wolves circle, but the lion does not yield." Yet even as he spoke, a single arrow carrying a bloodied cloth bearing the mark of a sporcher's hidden sister landed upon the ramparts, proof that the enemy's threat was no idle boast. The war had entered its darkest hour, and the next betrayal would decide the soul of an empire. As the first faint light of a blood-stained dawn crept over the hills surrounding Bursa, Arhan Sahib stood motionless upon the highest rampart, the bloodied cloth bearing the mark of a sporcher's hidden sister still clutched in his fist. The enemy camp stretched before him like a dark ocean of steel and fire, drums beating a slow, menacing rhythm that echoed across the parched fields. Thirst had already begun to claw at the throats of his people. Wells ran dangerously low. Yet his eyes burned with unyielding fire. "They believe they can break us with shadows and poisoned milk," he said, voice carrying to every captain gathered behind him. "Today we show them the Osmanli heart does not break. It only grows stronger in suffering." A sporcher stood at his side, her face drawn from a sleepless night of tending the sick and praying over the infant. "That cloth, it is hers, my sister. They have kept her from me all these years." Her voice trembled with rage and sorrow. Arhan turned to her, placing a hand upon her armored shoulder. "Then we will take her back, not by surrender, but by victory. You are no longer their blood alone. You are ours. Fight with that truth in your heart." She nodded, fingers tightening around the hilt of her dagger, now stained with the blood of previous battles. Inside the palace, Aladdin Sahib moved like a man possessed. He had sealed every corridor, doubled the guards around Gonya and the newborn. The child slept fitfully in his mother's arms, while Malhoun tested every drop of water and milk with her own lips. "Another servant lies dead," Abdul Rahman reported, voice heavy. "The poison moves like a ghost through our walls." Aladdin's eyes blazed. "Find Zarkan. Tear the city apart if you must. No mercy for the serpent who would murder our future." In the shadows of the lower kitchens, loyal men hunted, blades drawn, while the traitor Zarkan slipped deeper into the forgotten cisterns beneath the eastern wall. A small vial of poison hidden against his chest and fresh orders burning in his mind. Arhan descended to the war council. "We do not wait to die of thirst. Tarhan, take your elite riders and strike their western water trains at dusk. Create chaos. Make them fear every shadow. Faladios, prepare the fire ships. When they commit to the next assault, we burn their siege engines from the river. Tamir Boga, ready the archers for night volleys. Let arrows fall like divine judgment upon their tents." He paused, voice lowering. "And spread word among the captured prisoners we release today. Any man who raises hand against us will watch his own brothers burn before he dies. Let fear rot their unity." The day's fighting began with fury. Shahanshah ordered a full assault upon the western gate. Siege ladders rose like claws against the walls, while covered rams battered the ancient stones. Smoke and dust filled the air as Ottoman defenders poured boiling oil and burning pitch upon the attackers. Screams rose above the clash of steel. Tarhan fought like a man born of thunder upon the battlements, his sword a blur as he intercepted arrows mid-flight and hurled them back down. "Come taste Ottoman steel." He roared, cutting down ladder after ladder, sending men tumbling into the killing field below. In the thick of the smoke-choked breach, Barhan Faladios met a papal knight in single combat upon the broken ground. The knight, adorned with cross and blessing, charged with holy zeal. "Your false prophet's followers will burn in hell," he bellowed. Faladios answered with cold fury. "Then go first and announce our coming." Their duel was savage and personal. Heavy sword crashed against curved blade. Sparks flew as both men traded blows that could fell oxen. The knight's mace glanced off Faladios' shoulder, drawing blood. Faladios answered with a roar, spinning low and hamstringing the man before driving his sword through the knight's chest. As the papal warrior fell choking on his own blood, Faladios lifted the bloodied cross from his neck and hurled it back toward the enemy lines. "Your blessings mean nothing here." The sight broke the spirit of the nearest attackers, who began to fall back in disarray. Arhan led a countercharge through the shattered gate, a sporcher riding fearlessly beside him. Together they carved a path of wrath through the wavering Byzantine ranks. Her blade flashed, drawing blood in defense of the city that had become her home. "For my husband! For my child!" she cried, voice rising above the chaos. Orhan fought like the lion of his blood, each strike carrying the weight of justice and vengeance. Smoke from burning siege towers turned day into twilight. Flames roared skyward as Faladios's fire ships drifted down the river, igniting the enemy's floating platforms and supply barges in spectacular infernos. The river itself seemed to burn. Yet even as the assault faltered, new darkness gathered. A messenger reached Orhan under heavy guard, dragged forward by Mustafa. The man spat blood and defiance. "Shahanshah sends final warning. Return the princess by sunset, or watch the girl die before your walls. And know this, the traitor within has already tasted the child's milk again." Orhan struck the man down with a single blow. "Tell your master his threats only feed our resolve." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of fire and gold, Orhan gathered his most trusted captains in a hidden chamber. "We ride out tonight, a full breakout toward their command tent. We cut the head from this serpent." But as the words left his mouth, horns sounded from the eastern wall. Alarm cries rose. "The postern gate! It opens!" Zarkan had struck. Enemy soldiers poured through the narrow passage like rats into grain stores. Chaos erupted inside the city once more. Flames sprang up in the eastern quarter as infiltrators set houses ablaze. Orhan wheeled his horse. "To the east, seal the breach." He thundered through the streets with a Sporcher, Turhan, and Faladios at his back, streets filled with desperate fighting. Civilians fled screaming while warriors clashed house to house. Zarkan was spotted upon a rooftop, signaling enemy archers. Tamir Boga brought him down with a single arrow through the throat. The traitor fell screaming into the flames below, his betrayal ending in the very fire he had helped unleash. Yet the damage was done. Enemy forces now fought inside the walls. Aladdin Sahib battled in the palace corridors, protecting Gonya and the infant with his own body. A desperate clash left him wounded in the arm, but he stood firm. "You will not pass," he roared, cutting down two more intruders. Gonya, clutching the crying child, whispered prayers as Nilafar and Malhoun stood with daggers ready. Orhan reached the palace square amid swirling smoke and leaping flames. There, in the heart of the inferno, Damir Khan himself appeared at the head of a small elite force that had breached deepest. Their eyes met across the burning courtyard. "Orhan!" Damir Khan shouted, voice dripping with hatred and triumph. "Your empire ends tonight." The two commanders charged. Their duel became the center of the storm. Swords clashed with ringing fury. Damir Khan fought with treacherous skill, his blade poisoned at the edge. "I will take your wife. I will take your brother's child. Your name will be dust," Orhan parried with ferocious power. "You betrayed your own blood for power. Tonight you answer to Allah." Sparks flew as steel met steel. Damir Khan lunged, grazing Orhan's side with the poisoned blade. Pain flared, but Orhan answered with a roar that shook the heavens, driving his sword forward in a blinding series of strikes. He disarmed the traitor, then drove his fist into Damir Khan's face, shattering bone. As Damir Khan staggered, Orhan seized him by the throat. This is the fate of all traitors. With one final thrust, he ended the man's life, casting the body into the flames. Victory in that moment felt hollow. Enemy forces still swarmed parts of the city, thirst clawed at every throat. And upon the distant hill, Shahanshah raised a new banner, the young girl, a Sporcher's hidden sister, bound and visible to the walls, a knife held to her throat. "Choose now, Sultan," Shahanshah's voice carried on the wind. "Surrender the princess or watch her blood flow at dawn." Orhan stood amid the smoke and dying fires, blood running down his side from the poisoned wound, a Sporcher supporting him. His captains gathered, faces grim. The child cried from the palace windows. The city burned in pockets, and the enemy host, though bloodied, remained vast and unbroken. The siege had reached its breaking point. One dawn would decide everything: victory, betrayal, or the fall of Bursa itself. Orhan lifted his eyes to the heavens, gripping his sword tighter as the poison began to burn in his veins. "Allah, give us strength. The hour of judgment is upon us." The night deepened, heavy with prayers, steel, and the promise of greater fire yet to come. As the night wrapped Bursa in a suffocating embrace of smoke and distant screams, Arhan Sahib stood upon the blood-slicked palace square, the poison from Damia Khan's blade spreading like liquid fire through his veins. Every heartbeat sent fresh agony radiating from the wound at his side, yet he remained upright by sheer force of will, his sword planted firmly in the ground before him like an anchor against the storm. Flames from the eastern quarter still licked at the sky, casting long, dancing shadows across the faces of his warriors. The air reeked of charred wood, spilled blood, and the bitter tang of fear. A sporcher supported him with one arm, her own hands stained with the blood of enemies and the dust of a city fighting for its soul. "Arhen, you are wounded," she whispered, voice thick with dread. "Let the healers tend you." He shook his head slowly, eyes fixed upon the enemy camp where torches moved like a sea of angry stars. "There is no time for healing when the wolf is at our throat. If I fall tonight, it will be with my sword in hand and Allah's name upon my lips." Tarhen approached at a run, his elite armor dented and streaked with gore, yet his eyes burned with unquenchable loyalty. "My Sultan, the eastern breach is sealed, but at great cost. Zarkan's body burns with the traitors he invited. Faladios has hunted down the last infiltrators in the cisterns, yet the men grow weak from thirst. The wells yield less with every hour." Faladios himself emerged from the smoke, dragging a captured Byzantine officer by the collar. "This dog claims Shahanshah prepares the final storm for dawn. They will throw everything at us, every ladder, every engine blessed by their false priests." The prisoner spat blood. "Your sultan is already dying. Surrender the princess and the city may yet be spared." Faladios drove a knee into the man. "Back. Speak with respect or do not speak at all." Arhan stared down at the captive, his voice low and heavy with divine authority. "Go back to your master. Tell him Sultan Arhan Sahib still breathes. Tell him every threat against my wife's blood will be answered with rivers of your own. Tell him the Osmanli do not bargain with honor." He released the man under flag of truce, a calculated act of psychological warfare. Let the enemy see their own return alive while carrying words of defiance. As the messenger rode away, Arhan turned to his captains. "We do not wait for dawn like sheep before slaughter. Tarhen, take 300 of your finest. Slip out through the northern ravine under cover of darkness. Strike their western water caravans. Burn what you cannot carry. Let thirst become their curse as it is ours." Tarhen bowed deeply. "By my life and my faith, it shall be done." Mustafa stepped forward. "I will lead raids on their siege engines from the riverbank. Tamir Boga, your archers will cover us with fire from the walls." Jakarta Sahib and Altadin Sahib moved to fortify the inner defences, while Abdul Rahman stayed close to the palace, guarding Alauddin's family with his life. Inside the dimly lit chambers, Alauddin Sahib paced like a caged lion, his wounded arm bound tightly, fresh blood seeping through the cloth. Gonya sat upon the raised bed, cradling their newborn son against her chest, her face pale with exhaustion and terror. The infant whimpered softly, hungry yet dennied full milk for fear of poison. Malhoun and Nilafar stood guard with daggers, eyes scanning every shadow. "My husband," Gonya said softly, voice trembling, "if they break through again." Aladdin knelt before her, taking her hand. "They will not. I swear by Allah who raised the heavens without pillars. This child is our hope. He will grow to see cities fall and banners rise higher than any emperor's dream. But you must be strong, my beloved. For him, for us." He kissed the infant's forehead, whispering a long prayer of protection that brought tears to every woman's eyes. "Ya Allah, shield this innocent soul from the hands of the oppressors. Grant him a long life in service of truth and justice." In the war room, Arhan fought the poison with every breath, sweat beading upon his brow as he planned the night's desperate maneuvers. A sporcher stood beside him, no longer the hesitant Byzantine princess, but a woman forged in fire. "My sister, they will kill her at first light if I do not go." Arhan met her gaze, his voice raw with emotion and iron resolve. "You will not go, not as a sacrifice. If we ride together to take her back by the edge of our swords. You belong to this house now. To me, to our people, trust in that bond as I have learned to trust in you." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I was ready to die for my father once. Now I fight for something greater. For you, for this child, for the future we have only begun to build." As midnight cloaked the land, the raids began. Turhan's force melted into the darkness like ghosts of vengeance. They fell upon the western supply lines with terrifying suddenness. Swords flashed under moonlight. Wagons erupted in flames. Horses screamed and scattered as Ottoman warriors cut ropes and throats with equal precision. For Arhen Saheb, Turhan roared during a fierce skirmish, his blade intercepting arrows meant for his brothers, spinning like a whirlwind of death. Enemy guards died before they could raise full alarm. Precious water barrels were seized and dragged back toward the city under heavy guard, while the rest burned bright, sending a towering message of defiance into the night sky. Simultaneously, Palladios led a river assault. Fire ships drifted silently downstream before their crews ignited them and leaped clear. The flames raced toward the Byzantine siege engines and floating platforms with hungry fury. Chaos erupted along the riverbank. Men shouted in panic. Horses bolted. Great engines meant to breach Bursa's walls became funeral pyres, their smoke rising thick and black, choking the enemy camp and sowing terror in their ranks. See how the fire of truth consumes the liars, Palladios bellowed as he cut down fleeing engineers. The psychological blow landed hard. Desertions began in the outer tents as soldiers whispered of divine wrath upon their cause. Yet the enemy answered with fresh cruelty. Upon a hill visible from the walls, Shahanshah had the young girl, a sporcher's hidden sister, brought forward under torchlight. Even from afar her small figure could be seen bound, a knife gleaming at her throat. A herald's voice carried on the wind, amplified by trumpets. Sultan Arhen, deliver the princess a sporcher by dawn or watch this innocent blood flow. Your city thirsts, your people weaken, your own wound festers. How long can you defy the will of empires and the blessing of the Pope? Arhen stood upon the ramparts, supported by a sporcher and Mustafa, his vision blurring from the poison yet his spirit unbroken. They use children as shields because their faith is weak, he said loudly enough for nearby defenders to hear. We fight for justice, for honor, for the mercy of Allah. Hold fast, my brothers. Our hour of deliverance draws near. He raised his sword despite the pain, and a great cry rose from the walls. Aliyu Akbar. The chant rolled like thunder across the besieged city, lifting weary hearts and striking fear into the enemy. As the long night deepened, Arhen was finally persuaded to the healers. An old physician worked urgently, cutting away poisoned flesh and applying herbs blessed with prayers. The blade was cunningly treated, my sultan. You must rest. Arhen gripped the man's wrist. I will rest when Bursa is safe and my wife's sister is free. Give me strength for one more battle. A sporcher stayed by his side, wiping his brow, whispering words that blended love and duty. You taught me what it means to stand together. Do not leave me now to face this world alone. Their hands clasped tightly, a silent vow passing between them amid the groans of the wounded and the distant clash of steel. Dawn approached with merciless slowness. The enemy host stirred like a waking dragon. Siege towers, rebuilt in haste, began rolling forward once more. Shahanshah, Andronikos, and the remaining commanders rode before their lines, papal banners fluttering beside imperial eagles. Today we end this, Shahanshah declared. Break their walls. Drag Arhen before me in chains. The princess will watch her husband's end. Inside Bursa, Arhen rose despite the healer's protests. He mounted his warhorse with grim determination, a sporcher beside him upon her own steed. Turhen, Palladios, Tamir Boga, Mustafa, and the surviving captains formed around them. This is the hour, Arhen proclaimed, voice carrying across the assembled warriors. We sally forth. We strike their heart. We bring back the innocent or die trying. Let every man fight as if the eyes of Allah and all our ancestors are upon him. For faith. For justice. For the house of Osman. The great gates groaned open. Arhen Saheb led the charge like a storm given human form. Thousands of weary yet unbroken Ottoman warriors poured out, roaring prayers that shook the hills. Smoke from 100 fires mingled with the rising dust of hooves. Steel gleamed. Arrows darkened the sky. The two forces collided in a cataclysm of blood and fury that seemed to split the very heavens. In the heart of the maelstrom, Arhen sought Shahanshah himself, but fate delivered a different duel. A massive Byzantine general, personal champion of Andronikos, blocked his path. Their horses crashed together. Swords sang a song of death. Your time is over, Sultan of savages, the general bellowed. Arhen answered with a strike that nearly cleaved the man's shield in two. My time has only begun. The personal duel raged amid chaos and leaping flames as fire arrows continued to rain. Arhen, weakened by poison, fought with transcendent will, each blow carrying the weight of an empire's future. A sporcher fought nearby, protecting his flank with fierce loyalty, her blade claiming lives in defense of love and newfound family. Yet even as the battle reached its crescendo, a lone rider broke from the enemy rear, racing toward the palace with a small contingent. Zarkan's betrayal had left one final hidden passage open, and in the palace, as a lord battled desperately once more, a new shadow fell across the cradle of the newborn heir. The fate of Bursa hung by a thread of steel, faith, and blood. The sun rose higher, turning the battlefield into an inferno of smoke, screams, and unyielding honor. Whatever the coming hours brought, victory, martyrdom, or heartbreaking betrayal, the world would remember this day as the one where lions refused to kneel. And high upon the hill, the knife at the young girl's throat pressed closer as Shahanshah watched the carnage with cold, calculating eyes, waiting for the exact moment when Urhin's strength would finally shatter. As the sun climbed higher like a witness to divine judgment, the fields before Bursa transformed into a churning sea of steel, blood, and prayer. Urhin Sahib led the great sally from the front, his warhorse pounding across the scorched earth, every strike of its hooves sending fresh waves of agony through the poisoned wound at his side. Yet he did not falter. His sword gleamed high, catching the light as he roared across the battlefield. Allahu Akbar. For faith, for honor, for the future we carve with our own hands. Thousands answered him, their voices rising like thunder rolling through the valleys. A sporcher rode at his right, her face set with unbreakable resolve, no longer the sheltered daughter of emperors, but a warrior of the Osmanli house, her blade already hungry for the blood of those who threatened her sister and her new family. The two armies collided with cataclysmic force. The crash of shields and the scream of horses filled the air. Arrows fell like black rain. Smoke from the burning siege, engines drifted across the field, turning midday into a hellish twilight. Tarhan charged at the head of his elite riders, a whirlwind of death and precision. His sword moved like living lightning, intercepting arrows mid-flight and sending them harmlessly into the dirt while he cut down Byzantine captains one after another. Stand firm, brothers, he cried. Let them feel the weight of true loyalty. Palladios fought on the left flank like a man possessed by righteous fury, his blade carving through ranks of mercenaries who had once followed Damir Khan. Traitors and invaders, he bellowed. Your souls are already forfeit. In the center, Urhin pressed straight toward the hill where Shahanshah watched with cold arrogance. But fate placed a mountain in his path. A towering Byzantine general known as the Iron Cross, personal champion of Andronikos and blessed by papal decree, blocked his way. The man sat upon a massive armored destrier, his heavy two-handed sword dripping with the blood of earlier skirmishes. Arhen Sahib, the general thundered, voice carrying over the chaos. Your rebellion ends here. Your wife returns to her rightful blood or dies with you. Arhen reined in his horse, eyes burning with divine wrath. You speak of right and blood while hiding behind a child's throat. Your cross is stained with innocent tears. Come then, let us see whose faith is stronger. The two titans charged. Their horses crashed together with bone-jarring force. Steel met steel in a deafening ring that seemed to pause the entire battlefield for a heartbeat. The Iron Cross swung his massive blade in wide, crushing arcs. Arhen parried with ferocious skill, though each impact sent fresh fire racing through his poisoned veins. Sparks flew like angry stars. The general laughed through his visor. You bleed already, Sultan. How long can a poisoned dog fight? Arhen answered with a roar that came from the depths of his soul. Long enough to send you to your false god. He feinted left, then drove his curved sword under the man's guard, opening a deep gash across the champion's thigh. Blood sprayed across the horse's flank. The duel intensified into a storm of pure violence. The Iron Cross brought his blade down like an executioner's axe. Arhen twisted aside at the last moment, the blow shattering the ground where he had stood. He countered with lightning speed, his sword biting into the general's armored shoulder. The man bellowed in pain and rage. For the Pope and the Emperor, he screamed, swinging wildly. Arhen's horse reared as the blow glanced off its barding. In that moment of imbalance, the general lunged. His blade grazed Arhen's chest, adding a second wound. A sporcher cried out in horror from nearby, cutting down a soldier who tried to interfere. Arhen! Yet the Sultan drew strength from her voice. He straightened in the saddle, eyes blazing with the fire of justice and fate. You fight for thrones built on sand, he declared between ringing blows. I fight for a people, for honor, for the one true God. With a surge of transcendent will, Arhen drove his horse forward, smashing his shield into the general's face, denting the visor. As the man reeled, Arhen rose in his stirrups and delivered a devastating overhead strike. The blade found the gap between armor plates and sank deep. The Iron Cross gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. Impossible, he choked. Arhen withdrew his sword and watched the giant topple from his saddle, crashing to the blood-soaked earth. A great cry of triumph rose from the Ottoman ranks. The champion's fall broke the spirit of an entire Byzantine division. Seizing the momentum, Arhen pushed harder toward the hill. To the sister, save the innocent. Smoke thickened as Faladios ordered fresh fire arrows loosed into the enemy reserves. Entire sections of the Byzantine camp erupted in roaring flames. Horses panicked and stampeded through their own lines, trampling soldiers under iron-shod hooves. Chaos became Arhen's greatest ally. Tarhen's raiders returned from the western flank at that exact moment, driving captured water wagons and enemy cattle before them like a divine gift. Water for our people, Tarhen shouted, his voice carrying across the field. The sight of fresh supplies lifted the hearts of every defender. Yet Shahanshah was not yet finished. From the hilltop he gave a cruel signal. His guards dragged a sporcher's hidden sister forward, the knife pressed tighter against her young throat. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, yet she held a quiet dignity that tore at a sporcher's soul. Arhen, a sporcher cried, tears cutting tracks through the dust and blood on her face. She is my blood, but I will not trade one life for another. Save her with me. Arhen's heart burned with both fury and love. We take her by force of arms and honor. He led a desperate wedge straight up the hill, supported by Mustafa and Tamir Boga. Arrows whistled around them. Men fell on both sides. A sporcher fought like a lioness beside her husband, her small blade claiming the life of a guard who tried to bar their path. In the palace behind them, the second front raged with equal desperation. Aladdin Sahib battled in the inner corridors as a fresh wave of infiltrators, guided by one last hidden traitor among the servants, attempted to reach the royal chambers. Protect the heir, Aladdin roared, his wounded arm forgotten in the heat of combat. Abdul Rahman stood like a wall of iron at his side, axe rising and falling with deadly rhythm. None shall pass while breath remains in me. In the chamber, Gonya clutched the newborn tightly, while Malhoun and Nilafar barred the door with furniture and prayer. The infant cried loudly, as if sensing the shadow of death creeping closer. A desperate assassin broke through a side window, vial of poison in hand. Nilafar drove a dagger into his shoulder. Malhoun finished him with a strike born of maternal fury. You will not touch this child, she screamed. Allah protects the innocent. Back on the battlefield, Arhen finally reached the crest of the hill. Shahanshah retreated behind a wall of elite guards, his face twisted with desperation and hatred. You cannot win, Arhen. The Pope has promised us victory. All of Anatolia will bow. Arhen cut down two more guards, his movements slowing as the poison exacted its toll. Your Pope's promises are wind. Your empire is built on betrayal and fear. We build ours on justice and faith. A sporcher fought through to her sister's side. With a swift, precise strike, she severed the ropes binding the girl, then pulled her close. You are safe now. You are with family. The young girl clung to her, sobbing. For one brief, sacred moment amid the carnage, sister reunited with sister. But Shahanshah was not without one final card. From the rear, fresh Byzantine reserves poured forward under Andronikos' command, threatening to envelop Arhen's sally force. Smoke from the burning camps swirled thicker, blinding both sides. In that moment of confusion, a lone arrow, fired from hidden positions, struck Arhen's horse, causing the animal to collapse. Arhen hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his body. A sporcher screamed his name and rushed to his side. shielding him with her own body as enemy soldiers closed in. Tarhan and Palladios fought like demons to reach their sultan, blades singing, bodies piling around them. Orhan rose slowly to one knee, blood flowing freely now, vision narrowing. He looked up at the sky and whispered a long, heartfelt prayer. Ya Allah, if this is my hour, grant victory to my people. Protect my brother's son. Let a sporcher live to raise strong children in your path. Then, with a final surge of strength granted by faith itself, he stood tall once more. To me, my lions, we break them here. The battle reached a fever pitch of fire, smoke, and unyielding will. Shahanshah watched from a safer distance, his face pale with sudden doubt as his carefully woven siege began to unravel under the weight of Ottoman courage. Yet even as Orhan's forces fought to regain the initiative, horns sounded from the far eastern hills. New banners appeared on the horizon, unclear whether friend or yet another layer of betrayal. The sun burned mercilessly overhead. The wounded sultan stood surrounded by his most loyal warriors, a sporcher and her rescued sister at his side, while the fate of Bursa, the child heir, and the entire emerging empire hung trembling in the balance. The smoke continued to rise, the fires continued to rage, and the long day was still far from decided. Whatever forces approached from the east would either deliver salvation or deliver the final crushing blow. Orhan Sahib raised his bloodied sword toward the heavens once more, his voice hoarse but unbroken. Come what may, we stand. The war, like the flames devouring the battlefield, refused to die. As the smoke of burning siege engines coiled like dragons across the blood-soaked hills, the new banners on the eastern ridge unfurled against the wind, their colors cutting through the haze like a blade of uncertain fate. Orhan Sahib stood tall despite the poison devouring his strength, blood streaming from his wounds, his sword still raised toward the heavens. A sporcher shielded her trembling younger sister with her own body, the girl's small hands clutching desperately at her blood-stained cloak. Stay behind me, a sporcher whispered fiercely. You are safe now. You are home. Tarhan and Palladios formed a steel ring around their sultan, blades dripping, chests heaving, while Mustafa and Tamir Boga held the crumbling flank against Andronikos' fresh reserves. The eastern banners revealed themselves fully, not Byzantine gold and purple, but the green and black of distant allied tribes and hardened Ghazi warriors summoned by urgent riders days earlier, reinforcements Orhan had prayed would arrive. At their head rode Altadin Sahib and a hardened captain named Kulads, their horses lathered from a merciless forced march. A great roar erupted from the Ottoman lines. Reinforcements! Allah has sent them. The new warriors charged down the slope like an avalanche of faith and steel, crashing into the exposed Byzantine rear with devastating force. Arrows whistled. War cries split the sky. The momentum of the battle shifted violently. Orhan's voice rose above the din, raw and commanding. Now, break them, drive the invaders from our lands. With renewed fire, he surged forward on a fresh horse brought by one of his guards. The poison burned like molten iron in his veins, blurring his sight, yet every strike he delivered carried the weight of divine justice. He cut down 2 elite guards who tried to bar his path to Shahanshah's position. A sporcher fought beside him with ferocious grace, her dagger flashing as she protected her sister while striking at any who dared approach. For my husband, for my blood, for the house of Osman, she cried, her voice no longer that of a princess, but of a true Ottoman woman forged in fire and trial. Shahanshah watched the eastern charge with widening eyes, his calculated arrogance cracking at last. Hold the line, he screamed. Andronikos, send everything. Crush them before their numbers grow. Andronikos spurred his forces forward in a desperate counter, but the momentum had turned. Palladios led a brutal wedge through the center, his sword rising and falling like the judgment of ages. In the swirling chaos, he met a cluster of papal knights who had dismounted to fight on foot. Your blessings are ash. He roared, clashing with their leader in a storm of steel and sparks. The knight swung a blessed mace. Palladios ducked, drove his shoulder into the man's chest, then thrust upward through the gap in his armor. The knight fell gurgling prayers to a god who offered no protection that day. On the western edge of the field, Tarhan performed miracles of valor. Arrows rained upon his position, Yet he spun and cut them from the air with uncanny skill, leading charge after charge that shattered Byzantine formations. "You came to conquer," he shouted to the fleeing enemy. "Now flee or die with honor, if you still remember what honor means." His blade claimed many lives, each strike a message that loyalty to Arhan Sahib was stronger than any fear of emperors or popes. Inside the besieged palace, the fighting had not ceased. Aladdin Sahib battled in the grand corridors like a man defending paradise itself. His wounded arm bled freely, yet he refused to yield an inch. "For my brother, for my son," he roared, cutting down another infiltrator who had slipped through the chaos. Abdul Rahman stood at his side, axe cleaving through shields and helmets with thunderous blows. In the inner chamber, Gonya held the newborn tightly to her chest, rocking him as the sounds of steel and death echoed closer. Malhoun and Nilafar stood before the door like lionesses. "They will not touch him," Malhoun vowed, her voice trembling yet fierce. "Not while a single breath remains in our bodies." The infant's cries mixed with the distant roar of battle, a fragile sound of hope amid the storm. Back on the field, Arhan finally broke through to the foot of the hill where Shahanshah had made his stand. The opposing ruler's face twisted with desperation and hatred. "You should have accepted my terms, Arhan. Now you will watch everything burn." Shahanshah drew his own sword and descended with his remaining guard. Their blades met in a personal clash that seemed to still the surrounding fury for a moment. "You hide behind children and poison," Arhan growled through gritted teeth, parrying a vicious overhead strike. "I fight with truth and faith," Shahanshah laughed bitterly. "Faith will not save you from the poison in your blood." He lunged with surprising speed. Arhan twisted aside, his movements slower now, the toxin taking its toll. The blade grazed his shoulder. Fresh blood flowed. A sporcher, seeing her husband falter, charged forward with her sister safely passed to a trusted guard. "You will not take him from me," she cried. Her intervention distracted Shahanshah for a critical heartbeat. Arhan seized the moment. With a final surge of strength drawn from prayer and love, he drove forward, his sword slipping past the Emperor's guard and biting deep into his side. Shahanshah staggered, eyes wide with shock. "Impossible. We had the Pope here, we had everything." Arhan stood over him, breathing heavily. "You had nothing that matters. Take this lesson to your grave. Empires built on betrayal crumble before those built on justice." He did not deliver the killing blow. Instead, he let the wounded ruler fall to his knees, a living symbol of defeated arrogance, as Ottoman warriors swarmed past to secure the hill. The Byzantine lines began to break in earnest. Andronikos sounded the retreat, his face pale with disbelief as smoke and fire consumed his carefully laid plans. The papal banners were trampled under hooves. Thousands fled, leaving behind burning engines, dead comrades, and shattered ambitions. Yet even in victory, the cost was heavy. Many brave warriors lay upon the field, their faces turned toward the sky in eternal peace. Arhen swayed in the saddle as the battle ebbed. A sporcher rushed to him, supporting his weight, tears cutting through the grime on her face. "Hold on, my husband. The healers are coming. You must live. We have only just begun." Her rescued sister stood nearby, eyes wide with awe and fear, clutching a captured Ottoman cloak around her small shoulders. You came for me," the girl whispered. A sporcher pulled her close. "We came for all of us." Tarhen and Palladios cleared the final pockets of resistance, their faces grim with the knowledge that the war was far from over. Scouts reported that while Shahanshah's main force retreated in disorder, smaller columns still threatened supply routes, and whispers spoke of new alliances forming in Constantinople. The Pope's influence had not vanished with one defeat. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the battlefield in hues of gold and crimson, Arhen was carried back toward the gates of Bursa upon a litter borne by his most loyal men. The people lined the streets, cheering weakly through cracked lips, sharing the precious water brought by Turhan's raiders. In the palace, Aladdin rushed out to meet his brother. The two embraced fiercely, tears mixing with blood. Gonya brought the newborn forward, placing the child gently upon Arhan's chest for a moment. "See, my sultan," she said softly. "Your nephew lives because of your sacrifice." The infant's tiny hand brushed Arhan's beard, and for the first time that day, a faint smile touched the sultan's lips. Yet as night fell, and the healers worked desperately to draw the poison from his body, a lone scout arrived at the palace gates, bloodied and exhausted. He collapsed before Turhan. "My lord, a massive fleet has been sighted off the coast. Byzantine ships reinforced by Genoese and papal vessels. They come for revenge. And they carry something worse. Word that Yakid's remaining loyalists have joined them, swearing vengeance for their fallen master." Urhen, lying upon the healer's table with a sporcher holding his hand, heard the report through fading consciousness. His eyes opened with renewed fire. "Then we prepare," he whispered hoarsely. "The war does not end with one battle. It ends when justice reigns and no traitor dares raise his head again." A sporcher leaned close, pressing her forehead to his. "Together, always together now." Outside, the fires of victory burned low across the hills, but new smoke rose on the distant horizon where the sea met the sky. The child heir slept peacefully for the first time in days, guarded by prayers and steel. A sporcher's sister rested in safety, yet the scars of captivity lingered in her eyes. And somewhere in the shadows of the recovering city, one final whisper of betrayal moved silently, waiting for the moment when the Sultan's strength was at its lowest. The siege had been broken, but the greater storm approached from the sea, hungry for vengeance and carrying the seeds of new conflicts that would test the soul of a rising empire to its very core. Bursa stood wounded but unbroken, its sultan clinging to life by faith and iron will, while the long night deepened with the promise of greater trials yet to come. As the velvet darkness of night settled over the wounded city of Bursa, lanterns and watchfires flickered like anxious stars across rooftops and battlements. Inside the grand palace chamber heavy with incense and the sharp scent of healing herbs, Sultan Urhan Sahib lay upon a wide bed draped in clean linen now stained with his blood. The poison from Damir Khan's treacherous blade still coursed through his veins like slow fire, drawing sweat from his brow and shallow breaths from his chest. A sporcher knelt beside him, one hand clasped tightly in his, the other gently wiping his forehead with cool cloths. Her younger sister, the girl now named Safia, sat quietly in the corner, wrapped in soft robes, eyes wide with the trauma of captivity and the miracle of rescue. "Stay with me, Arhen," a sporcher whispered, her voice trembling yet steady with newfound strength. "You brought me back from the edge of darkness. You saved my sister. You cannot leave us now. Our story has only begun." Arhen's eyes fluttered open, burning with fever yet filled with unyielding will. "I will not leave, not while enemies still breathe upon our shores. Allah has kept me alive this long for a reason." The old healer worked urgently, pressing fresh poultices into the wounds and forcing bitter draughts between his lips. "The poison is deep, my sultan, but your blood is strong and your faith stronger. Fight it as you fought on the field." In the adjacent halls, Aladdin Sahib moved despite his own injuries, organizing the defense of the city with renewed urgency. Gonya stood beside him, the newborn cradled against her shoulder, wrapped in silk embroidered with protective prayers. The infant slept peacefully at last, tiny fingers curled around his mother's robe. "He senses the storm is not yet over," Gonya said softly. Aladdin kissed her temple. "Then we shall teach him from his first days that the Osmanli house bends the storm to its will. Abdul Rahman, double the watches on the sea road. Tamir Boga sends scouts to the coast. We must know when their fleet appears." Malhoun and Nilafar moved among the wounded warriors, offering water and words of comfort, their hands never idle. Outside, the city stirred with determined activity despite exhaustion and thirst. Torches moved along the walls as fresh earthworks were raised, and damaged gates reinforced with timber and iron. Barhan Faladios oversaw the arming of every able man and boy, his voice echoing through the training grounds. "The sea brings new wolves. We will greet them with fire and steel. Let no man think the battle ended today. It has only changed its face." Turhan walked among the elite riders, sharpening blades and checking saddles by firelight. "The Sultan lives. The sister is saved. Our hearts are full. Now we prepare to break another army." Deep into the night, Arhen grew stronger enough to sit with support. A sporcher helped him to the balcony, overlooking the darkened hills still littered with the debris of victory. Fires smoldered in the distance where the enemy had fled. "They will not forgive this defeat," Arhin said hoarsely, gripping the stone railing. Shahanshah survived. Andronikos still commands ships. The Pope's gold flows like a river, and Yakid's remaining dogs have found new masters. A sporcher leaned against him, Safia standing close by her side. My sister told me they spoke of a great fleet gathering at sea. Genoese galleys bought with promises of trade and papal blessings. They mean to strike Bursa from the water while we are still bleeding. Arhin turned to her, his gaze softening for a moment. You have become the heart of this house, a sporcher Khartan. Once you ran to save your father. Now you stand beside me to save our people. This is the path I prayed you would walk. Safia looked up at them both, voice small but clear. They said I was a weapon against you, but you came like thunder. I want to stay with my sister, with all of you. A sporcher embraced her tightly. You will. No one will ever use you again. At first light, grim news arrived. Scouts rode in hard, horses foaming. My Sultan, the fleet has been sighted. Over 80 sails, Byzantine warships, Genoese heavy galleys, and smaller vessels carrying Yakid's loyalists and mercenaries. They move along the coast toward the Marmara, 3 days at most before they can threaten the harbor approaches. Arhin rose to his feet with visible effort, supported by Turhan and Palladios. Then we do not wait behind walls like frightened deer. We carry the fight to the sea. Mustafa, ready every available ship and fishing vessel. We will meet them before they form their lines. Palladios, load fire ships with pitch and Greek fire. Turhan, prepare cavalry to strike any landing parties that reach the shore. We cut their supply ships first, starve their grand fleet before it can starve us. Throughout the day, Bursa transformed into a forge of war. Blacksmiths hammered without rest. Women sewed sails and prepared bandages. Prayers rose continuously from every mosque and corner as muezzins called louder than ever. Aladdin remained in the city to guard the palace and the air, while Arhin, still pale and bandaged, insisted on riding to the coast with a mobile command. A sporcher refused to remain behind. Where you go, I go. My sister stays under Aladdin's protection. I will fight at your side as your wife. Safia watched her go with brave eyes, whispering, Come back to us. The coast appeared under grey skies 2 days later. Arhin's smaller but determined flotilla waited in concealed coves while scouts tracked the enemy armada. As the massive fleet rounded the headland, its size was daunting, tall ships with cross-emblazoned sails and armored decks crowded with soldiers. Yet Arhin's voice carried calm authority across his decks. They come heavy with pride. We come light with faith. Strike their supply vessels first. Burn their water. Let panic spread faster than fire. At dusk, the signal was given. Ottoman fire ships, small and swift, were released with the tide and wind at their backs. Flames roared to life as crews leaped clear. The burning vessels drifted straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Panic erupted across the Byzantine decks. Galleys tried to maneuver, but collided in the chaos. Great columns of black smoke rose into the evening sky as supply ships laden with food, water, and siege equipment became towering infernos. Screams carried across the water. Allah is with us, Arhin shouted from the lead ship. Turhan led a daring boarding action against a lagging Genoese galley, his warriors leaping across with grappling hooks, swords flashing in the firelight. In the heart of the naval melee, Palladios dueled the captain of a Byzantine flagship in a ferocious clash upon the burning deck. For Yakid, the enemy captain snarled. For justice and the fallen, Palladios answered, their blades ringing above the roar of flames. Steel met steel in a deadly dance until Palladios drove the man back against the railing and sent him plunging into the fiery sea below. Arhin stood at the prow of his command ship, a sporcher beside him, as arrows whistled past and waves crashed against the hull. The poison still weakened him, yet his presence alone inspired every fighter. Push them toward the rocks, he commanded. Drive them into the shallows where their great ships cannot maneuver. The Ottoman vessels, smaller and more agile, darted like wolves among bears, cutting ropes, burning sails, and sowing terror. Yet as the night battle raged and several enemy ships were sent to the bottom, a captured officer was brought before Arhin, bound and defiant. You delay the inevitable, Sultan. Shahanshah has already sent word to Constantinople. Mori fleets come. And inside your own house, the man laughed weakly. Even now, another knife turns. Before he could speak further, an arrow from a hidden enemy marksman struck him dead. Arhin's face darkened. A sporcher gripped his arm. Another betrayal. The sea battle continued to rage under moonlight and fire, waves reflecting the inferno. Arhan Sahib stood tall against the pain, watching his warriors press the advantage, yet the officer's dying words echoed in his mind like a warning from fate itself. Far behind them in Bursa, as Aladdin patrolled the palace corridors, a new shadow moved silently toward the royal chambers where the newborn heir slept under the watch of loyal guards. The flames upon the water burned brighter, the night grew deeper, and the war, ever hungry, reached once more for the heart of the Ottoman house. As the moon hung low and blood-red over the churning Marmara, the naval battle transformed the sea itself into a blazing inferno. Flames leaped from ship to ship, turning night into a roaring, hellish dawn. Arhan Sahib stood at the prow of his command galley, bandaged and fevered, yet towering in presence. The poison still gnawed at his strength, sending waves of fire through his limbs, but his voice rang clear and commanding across the water. Drive them harder. Burn their hearts before they burn our shores. Allah watches this night. A sporcher remained at his side, her cloak singed, hair whipping in the salt wind, one hand gripping the rail while the other rested protectively near her dagger. They will not break us, she said fiercely, eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Not after everything we have endured. Arhan placed a bloodied hand over hers. You have become the steel in my spine, a sporcher carton. Stay close. This night tests more than ships. Tarhan led a squadron of swift galleys in a masterful flanking maneuver, cutting through the enemy formation like a blade through silk. His warriors hurled grappling hooks, boarding Genoese vessels with savage cries. Tarhan himself was first across, sword flashing as he intercepted arrows meant for his men, spinning and cutting ropes, sending enemy sails crashing down in flames. For Arhan Sahib, for Bursa, he roared, his blade claiming the life of a Genoese captain who tried to rally his crew. The deck became a slaughterhouse of slipping blood and choking smoke. One by one, the heavier enemy ships were set ablaze or captured, their proud banners cast into the sea. Further out, Barhan Faladios commanded the fire ships with demonic precision. He steered the lead vessel himself until the last possible moment, leaping to a waiting skiff as flames consumed the enemy flagship. The crash of timber and the screams of burning men filled the air. In the heart of that chaos, Faladios dueled the Byzantine admiral upon a half-sunken deck, waves crashing around them, fire licking at their heels. You serve a dying empire, the admiral spat, swinging a heavy axe. Faladios met the blow with ringing steel. And you serve traitors and false prophets. Your time ends tonight. Their combat was brutal and personal. Axe and sword clashed in showers of sparks. Faladios took a cut across his ribs, but answered with unrelenting fury, driving the admiral back until a final thrust sent the man tumbling into the fiery waves. Tell your masters in hell that the Osmanli have come. Arhin's smaller, agile fleet exploited every advantage. They struck supply galleys first, as planned, sending precious water and food stores to the bottom. Thirst and fear now spread through the massive enemy armada faster than the flames. Panic rippled through their ranks. Ships collided in desperate attempts to escape the fire ships. Ottoman warriors shouted taunts across the water, psychological blows as sharp as any blade. Your pope cannot save you from Allah's wrath. Your emperor flees while you burn. Yet the enemy numbers remained daunting. A cluster of heavy Byzantine warships turned toward Arhan's command ship, recognizing the Sultan's banner. Arrows rained down. One struck the mast above a sporcher's head. She did not flinch. Instead, she took up a bow and returned fire with surprising accuracy, felling an enemy archer. They come for you, my husband, she warned. Arhan gripped his sword tighter. Then let them come. Today they learn that poison and numbers mean nothing before true faith. The two forces closed, boarding hooks locked. Arhan led the defense personally, cutting down the first invaders who leaped aboard. His movements were slower, pained, yet each strike carried lethal authority. A sporcher fought beside him, her dagger swift and deadly, protecting his blind side as husband and wife became an unbreakable front. Smoke billowed thick across the decks. Flames reflected in their eyes. For long, terrible minutes, the outcome hung by a thread of steel and will. Then, from the rear of the enemy fleet, New chaos erupted. Mustafa had executed a brilliant night maneuver with hidden fishing boats converted into raiders, striking the rear supply line and sowing confusion. The great armada began to fracture. Many captains, seeing their waterships lost and their admiral dead, sounded retreat. The sea carried away burning wrecks and the cries of the defeated. As the enemy fleet withdrew in disorder toward the horizon, Urhin lowered his sword, breathing heavily. A sporcher supported him, her arm around his waist. "We have won the night," she said. He nodded, eyes fixed on the retreating sails. "A battle, not the war. They will return. And the knife in Bursa still turns." Far behind them, in the palace of Bursa, danger had already struck. Aladdin Sahib moved through the dimly lit corridors, sword drawn, when the first scream echoed from the royal wing. He broke into a run. Abdul Rahman lay wounded near the chamber door, blood pooling beneath him, an assassin's dagger buried in his side. They came through the old cistern passage, Zarkan's last shadow. Aladdin burst into the inner chamber. Gonya stood with her back to the cradle, a small blade in her trembling hands, face pale with fury. The newborn wailed behind her. Two assassins lay dead at her feet, killed by Nilafar and Malhoun, who now fought desperately against a third intruder. The man was no common soldier. He wore the garb of a trusted servant, but his eyes burned with Yakid's old hatred. "You will not touch this child," Gonya cried. Aladdin engaged the traitor with savage speed. Their blades clashed violently in the confined space. "Another dog of betrayal," Aladdin roared. "Your master is dead, your cause is ash." The assassin laughed through gritted teeth. "Yakid, blood demands payment. The child dies, then the sultan falls." He fought with desperate skill, but Aladdin's righteous fury proved stronger. With a powerful thrust, he drove his sword through the man's chest. The traitor collapsed, whispering curses as life left him. Aladdin rushed to the cradle. The infant was unharmed, though crying with terror. Gonya fell into his arms, sobbing. "He is safe, by Allah's mercy, he is safe." Malhoun and Nilafar tended Abdul Rahman's wound, their hands shaking. Yet the victory was bittersweet. The assassin had not come alone. Scouts later reported a small force of Yakid's loyalists had slipped ashore during the naval distraction and nearly reached the palace heart. Dawn broke over Bursa with both relief and exhaustion. Urhin's flotilla returned to the harbour, victorious yet battered. As he was helped ashore, still weak from poison and battle, the people gathered to cheer their sultan. A sporcher walked beside him, supporting his steps, Safia waiting anxiously at the palace gates. The family reunited in the great hall, Urhin embracing Aladdin, looking upon the newborn with exhausted pride, a sporcher introducing her sister to Gonya and the others. Yet even in this moment of hard-won peace, shadows lingered. Urhin convened his captains despite his condition. The fleet retreats, but they will regroup. Shahanshah still breathes. Constantinople prepares greater vengeance, and the betrayal within our walls has not been fully cut out. Turhan stepped forward. "My sultan, we captured documents from a burning galley. They speak of one more high-ranking traitor still hidden among us, someone close to the inner circle." Palladios clenched his fists. "Give me leave to root him out. I will burn the treachery from our house." Urhin nodded slowly, eyes heavy with responsibility. "Do so, but with justice, not rage. We are not like them." He looked at a sporcher, then at the infant sleeping once more in Gonya's arms. "We build something greater than revenge. We build a legacy that will outlast empires." As evening fell once more, a lone rider approached the city gates under flag of truce. He carried a sealed message from Shahanshah himself. Urhin broke the seal in the war chamber, reading in silence as his captains watched. The Sultan's face darkened like gathering storm clouds. He passed the letter to a sporcher. The message was short, cruel, and direct. Shahanshah offered one final exchange. A sporcher's father, still imprisoned in Constantinople, would be returned alive, but only if Urhin delivered his own newborn nephew as hostage and swore vassalage to the Byzantine throne. Refusal would bring not just fleets, but a holy crusade blessed by the Pope, promising total annihilation. Urhin crushed the parchment in his fist. He rose despite the pain, eyes burning with renewed fire. "They still do not understand. Tell every muezzin to call the faithful. Prepare the city. Ready the ships. If they want total war, then total war they shall have. Outside, the sea lay deceptively calm under the rising moon. Yet far on the horizon, new sails began to appear, distant specks that promised the next storm. Inside the palace, the newborn stirred in his sleep, as if sensing the gathering weight of destiny. The war had not ended with fire and victory upon the waves. It had only grown larger, hungrier, reaching now for the very soul of the emerging empire and the fragile lives that carried its future. And Sultan Arhan Sahib, poisoned and weary, stood ready once more. As the pale light of a new dawn bled across the Marmara like a fresh wound, Sultan Arhan Sahib stood upon the highest tower of Bursa, the crushed parchment from Shahanshah still clutched in his bandaged fist. The poison had retreated but not vanished, leaving his body heavy and his eyes bright with fevered resolve. A sporcher stood at his right, her arm linked with his, while young Safia remained close behind her sister, eyes still haunted by memories of chains and torches. The sea stretched before them, deceptively calm, yet dotted with the distant specks of new sails gathering on the horizon like vultures circling a dying lion. Arhin's voice cut through the morning wind, low and terrible. They dare demand my brother's son as hostage. They would trade an old man's life for an infant's future. This is not negotiation. This is the language of devils. He turned to his captains gathered behind him. There will be no exchange, no vassalage, no bending of the knee. We answer their holy crusade with our own jihad of justice and survival. Tarhan stepped forward, his armor still scorched from the sea battle. The men are ready, my sultan. Every sword has been sharpened twice, the walls strengthened, but the last traitor still walks among us like a shadow wearing a familiar face. Palladios gripped the hilt of his sword until his knuckles whitened. Give me permission to search every corner. I will drag the serpent into the light and cut the betrayal from our house with my own hands. Arhin nodded slowly. Do it, but do it with witnesses. Let no man say we became what we fight against. Justice must be seen as well as felt. Throughout the morning, the hunt began. Palladios and Mustafa moved through the barracks, the markets, and the palace corridors like wolves on the scent. Servants and captains alike were questioned with firm but measured hands. Tension thickened the air. In the palace gardens, Aladdin Sahib walked with Gonya and the newborn, the child soft, who's a fragile thread of hope amid gathering storm. Gonya held the infant close to her heart. He slept through the night for the first time since the poisonings. Yet I fear every shadow now. Aladdin placed a protective hand over his son. We named him in the midst of fire. He will grow strong in it. Look at your sister, a sporcher. Even she begins to smile. Safia sat nearby on a stone bench, watching the baby with quiet wonder, slowly healing under the warmth of her new family. In the war chamber later that day, Arhan convened his inner circle despite the healer's warnings. Maps of the coast and Constantinople lay spread before them. We do not wait for their fleet to regroup, he declared, voice gaining strength with every word. We strike their landing points before they can establish bases. Tarhan, you will command the coastal cavalry. Burn every camp they try to build. Palladios, take the fire ships again. Make the sea their graveyard. Altadin Sahib and Jakarta will hold Bursa with iron discipline. A sporcher stepped forward, no longer asking permission but claiming her place. And I will ride with you, my husband. My knowledge of their ways, their signals, their weaknesses can serve our cause. I am no longer their princess. I am your wife, and this is my war too. Arhin looked at her long, pride and love burning in his gaze. Then ride at my side, a sporcher Khartan. Let them see that the woman they sought to use now stands as the blade at their throat. As preparations intensified, the last traitor revealed himself in blood. In the lower armory, one of the senior supply captains, a man named Karam who had served since the early days, drew his sword upon Palladios when cornered. Yakid was right, he snarled. Arhin will lead us to ruin with his pride. Shahanshah offers gold and survival. Their duel erupted between racks of spears and shields. Steel rang violently. Karam fought with the desperation of a cornered rat, but Palladios was a storm of righteous anger. You would sell an infant for gold, Palladios roared, parrying a wild thrust and countering with a cut across the traitor's chest. Karam staggered, blood spraying across the stone floor. Better a living dog than a dead lion. With one final, powerful strike, Faladios ended the betrayal. The man fell among the weapons he had sought to sabotage, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling as the last whisper of internal poison left the house of Osman. Orhan received the news with grim satisfaction. One less shadow behind our backs. Now we face the light of open war. That evening, as the sun sank into the sea, he gathered his family in the inner courtyard. The air carried the scent of orange blossoms and distant smoke. He held the newborn gently in his arms for the first time since returning, the tiny child looking up at him with innocent eyes. "Little one," Orhan whispered, voice thick with emotion, "you were born into fire, but you will live beneath banners of victory. I swear it upon my soul." Gonya wept quietly with joy. Aladdin clasped his brother's shoulder. A sporcher stood with Safia, the two sisters finding new strength in each other. "We are no longer divided," a sporcher said softly. "By blood or by fate, we are one house now." But peace was brief. Horns sounded from the western watchtowers as night fell. The new fleet had closed faster than expected. Dozens of sails now filled the horizon, moving under moonlight like a swarm of dark predators. Among them flew not only Byzantine and Genoese banners, but fresh papal standards and the black flags of Yaqids, surviving fanatics seeking vengeance. Orhan rose immediately, pain forgotten in the heat of command. "To the ships and to the shore, we meet them before they touch our land." The entire city surged into motion. Torches blazed along the walls. Warriors mounted horses. Sailors ran to their vessels. Orhan mounted his warhorse with a sporcher beside him, both armored and ready. Turhan and Faladios took their positions. The newborn was placed once more under heavy guard, with Aladdin remaining as the city's shield. The combined land and sea assault began before midnight. Ottoman fire ships raced across the dark water once again, while coastal cavalry thundered along the shores. Orhan led from the front, riding along the beach as arrows whistled overhead and enemy longboats began dropping into the surf. "Hold the line," he commanded. "Let no foot touch our soil unchallenged." A sporcher fought at his flank, her sword now replaced by a finer blade gifted by Aladdin, striking down enemy soldiers who tried to establish a beachhead. The night erupted into savage combat. Waves crashed red with blood. Steel clashed against steel. Fire met water in hissing fury. Turhan led a devastating charge into the surf, his horse plunging through the shallows, intercepting a Byzantine landing party and cutting them down before they could form ranks. Faladios boarded an enemy transport ship in a frenzy of violence, his war cry echoing across the water as he dueled their commanding officer atop the swaying deck. Yet amid the chaos, a single black-sailed ship slipped through the Ottoman lines, carrying a small but deadly force of Yaqids' most fanatical remnants. Their target was not the main battle, but a lightning strike toward the palace itself, guided by one final hidden map stolen during Khurram's betrayal. Orhan sensed the danger too late. A messenger reached him mid-battle, voice hoarse. "My Sultan, they have broken through a hidden cove. They ride for the palace." Orhan wheeled his horse, face carved with fury and fear. "A sporcher with me. Turhan, hold the shore. Faladios, burn every ship you can." Husband and wife raced back toward Bursa at breakneck speed, their horses kicking up sand and spray, hearts pounding with the terror that the final blow might fall upon the innocent heart of their house. Behind them, the sea battle raged mercilessly. Ahead, the palace lights flickered like a beacon under threat. And in the darkened corridors of Bursa, the last desperate assassins of a dying old order moved like ghosts toward the royal chambers where the future of the empire slept. The long night was not yet over. The fires burned higher. The swords thirsted for more. And the fate of everything Orhan Sahib had built now rested upon how swiftly justice could outrun betrayal. As the thunder of hooves tore across the moonlit coastal road, Sultan Orhan Sahib rode like a man possessed by both love and divine wrath, his poisoned body screaming in protest with every stride of his warhorse. A sporcher galloped beside him, her face streaked with salt spray and enemy blood, her new blade drawn and ready. Behind them, a small company of elite riders strained to keep pace, their horses foaming under the desperate urgency. "Faster!" Orhan roared into the wind. If they touch one hair upon that child's head, I will turn the sea red and Constantinople to ash. A sporcher's voice cut through the night beside him, fierce and unyielding. They will not have him, not while I draw breath, not while any of us still stand. In the palace of Bursa, terror had already slipped through the ancient stones. Aladdin Sahib fought like a cornered lion in the outer corridors, his sword a blur of righteous fury, as three black-clad assassins of Yaqid's remnant cult pressed him hard. "You will not pass," he bellowed, voice echoing off marble walls. "This house is protected by Allah and by the blood of martyrs." Abdul Rahman, still bleeding from his earlier wound, stood at his side, axe rising and falling with deadly rhythm. One assassin fell screaming, throat opened by Aladdin's blade. Another lost an arm to Abdul Rahman's axe before collapsing in a pool of his own darkness. Yet a fourth killer had slipped past them through a forgotten servant's passage, moving like smoke toward the royal chambers. Gonya stood before the cradle like a mother lion, the newborn clutched tightly to her chest, a dagger trembling in her free hand. Malhoun and Nilafar flanked her, their faces pale, but eyes burning with protective fire. Young Safia hid the child's face against her shoulder, whispering prayers she had only just learned. "O Lord of the worlds," Gonya breathed, voice breaking yet strong, "shield this innocent soul. Let not the hands of the wicked touch what you have granted us." The assassin burst through the inner door, masked and silent, curved blade gleaming with fresh poison. "The line of Arhan ends tonight," he hissed. "Yaqid, blood demands it." Gonya did not retreat. She stepped forward, shielding her son with her own body. "Then you will have to go through a mother first." The killer lunged. Nilafar threw herself in front, taking a shallow cut across her shoulder with a cry of pain. Malhoun struck the man's arm with a heavy candlestick, buying precious seconds. The newborn wailed in terror as chaos swallowed the chamber. Outside the palace walls, Arhen and a sporcher arrived like a storm of vengeance. They leaped from their horses before they had fully stopped, swords already drawn. "To the royal wing," Arhen commanded, voice hoarse with fury and fear. "Every man with me." A sporcher ran at his side, no hesitation, no plea for safety. They stormed through the corridors, cutting down two more black-clad intruders who tried to block their path. Steel sang. Blood sprayed across ancient tiles. Arhen's movements were slowed by poison and exhaustion, yet each strike carried the full weight of a sultan defending his blood. They reached the royal chambers just as the lead assassin raised his poisoned blade over Gonya, who had fallen to her knees still clutching the infant. "No!" a sporcher screamed. She threw herself forward, her sword clashing against the killer in a desperate parry. Arhen followed like divine judgment itself. "You dare raise steel against my brother's son?" His blade crashed down with terrifying force. The assassin spun to meet him, but Arhen was beyond pain now, driven by a father's rage for the entire house. Their duel was short and merciless. Arhen feinted high, then drove his sword through the man's chest with a roar that shook the walls. The assassin gasped, eyes wide behind his mask. "Yaqid will be avenged." Arhen twisted the blade. "Yaqid rots in hell, and you join him now." He ripped the sword free, and the traitor collapsed lifeless at his feet. Silence fell across the chamber, broken only by the newborn's cries and the heavy breathing of exhausted warriors. Arhen dropped to his knees beside Gonya, taking the infant gently into his arms. The child's tiny hands gripped his bloodied beard. Tears, rare and precious, filled the Sultan's eyes. "He lives," Arhen whispered, voice cracking. "By the mercy of Allah, he lives." Gonya collapsed into Aladdin's arms as he rushed in, both parents weeping with relief. A sporcher embraced Safia and Nilafar, checking wounds, her own hands shaking for the first time that night. "We are still here," she said softly, "all of us together." Yet even as relief washed over the palace, horns sounded again from the distant shore. The sea battle had not ended. Tarhan sent a rider with urgent word. "The enemy has landed a strong force 5 miles north. They march on Bursa under black banners. Yaqid's fanatics lead them, swearing to burn the city and take the child's head as trophy." Arhen rose slowly, handing the infant back to Gonya with infinite care. He looked at his brother, at his wife, at the women who had defended the future with nothing but faith and daggers. "The war follows us home again and again, but we will meet it every time." He turned to Faladios, who had just arrived covered in soot and seawater. Take every available man. We march before dawn, burn their landing camp, drive them back into the sea, show them that Bursa does not fall. Falladio's bowed, eyes blazing. It will be done, my sultan, with fire and with justice. As the deepest hours of night gave way to the grey promise of dawn, Urhan stood once more upon the palace steps, armoured and ready despite the healer's desperate pleas. A sporcher stood beside him in full battle gear, her face set with unbreakable determination. Safia watched from the doorway, whispering prayers for their safe return. Aladdin remained behind once more, the protector of the heart of the house, his arm around Gonya as the newborn finally quieted against her breast. The column marched out of Bursa under the fading stars, Urhan at its head, Turhan and Falladios commanding the flanks, Mustafa leading the rear. Smoke still rose from the sea where burning wrecks drifted like funeral pyres. The air carried the scent of salt, blood, and coming fire. As they approached the enemy landing site, the black banners of Yakid's remnants became visible, fluttering like evil spirits against the dawn sky. Their leader, a scarred fanatic who had once sworn blood oath to the traitor, stood upon a makeshift platform, screaming promises of vengeance and holy slaughter. Urhan reined in his horse upon a low rise overlooking the camp. "They bring hate and fire," he said, voice carrying to every warrior. "We bring justice and faith. Today we end this shadow once and for all." He raised his sword high. "Aliyu Akbar!" The roar that answered him shook the hills. The final charge began as the sun crested the horizon, painting the battlefield in gold and crimson. Turhan led the first wave, crashing into the enemy lines like a thunderbolt. Falladios drove straight for the black banners, his sword seeking the heart of the fanatic leader. Urhan and a sporcher rode together in the center, husband and wife, sultan and khartan, carving a path of destiny through the last desperate servants of a dead betrayal. Steel clashed, flames rose once more, prayers and war cries mingled in the morning air. Yet as the battle reached its peak, a lone arrow, fired from a hidden position within the enemy camp, streaked toward Urhan's heart. A sporcher saw it at the last instant. She threw herself forward, shielding him with her body. The arrow struck. Blood flowed. And the long night of fire, betrayal, and unyielding honor prepared to write its next bloody chapter upon the soul of a rising empire. As the arrow struck true, a cry sharper than any blade tore across the battlefield. A sporcher threw herself before her husband with no hesitation, no second thought, only the fierce love of a woman who had chosen her fate. The shaft buried itself deep into her shoulder, just below the edge of her armor. Blood bloomed dark and hot across her cloak. She staggered, but did not fall. Urhan's roar of anguish and fury shook the very heavens. A sporcher. He caught her in his arms before she could collapse, lowering her gently onto the blood-warmed earth as the battle raged around them like a storm of steel and fire. "No, not you," he whispered fiercely, pressing his hand over the wound to stem the flow. Her face was pale, yet her eyes burned with defiance. "I am still here," she breathed, voice tight with pain. "Finish them, my sultan, for our family, for the child." Safia's face flashed in her mind, and the newborn's innocent cry, and she found strength enough to grip Urhan's hand. "Do not stop for me. Win." Urhan's eyes filled with tears of rage and love as he tore a strip from his own cloak and bound her wound with trembling hands. "You will live," he vowed, voice breaking. "You will see our son grow strong. You will walk beside me when we enter Constantinople as conquerors, not captives." He kissed her forehead, then rose like a man reborn in fire. The poison in his veins, the exhaustion in his bones, everything vanished beneath the white-hot flame of protecting what was his. "Turhan, Falladios. To me, protect your Khartan." Turhan arrived like lightning, leaping from his horse to stand guard over a sporcher with two other elite warriors, his sword a spinning wall of death against any who dared approach. "No one touches her," he roared. Falladios, eyes blazing with holy wrath, charged straight into the heart of the black banners. "For a sporcher, Khartan, for the house of Osman." His blade carved a path of ruin through Yakid's fanatics. Scarred leader of the remnants met him in single combat upon the burning sand, their swords clashing with the hatred of old betrayals and new vengeance. "Your sultan's bloodline ends today," the fanatic screamed. Falladio's answered with a laugh like thunder. Then come take it, dog. I am waiting. Their duel was savage, blades ringing, feet sliding in blood and sand. Falladio's took a cut across his arm but pressed forward relentlessly until his final thrust drove deep into the man's chest. The fanatic fell to his knees, eyes wide with shock, before Falladio's ended his suffering with one clean stroke. The black banners toppled, trampled beneath Ottoman hooves. Arhen himself became the storm. He charged into the thickest press of enemies with a roar that carried the pain of every wound, every betrayal, every moment of fear for his family. His sword rose and fell like divine judgment. Men fell before him as wheat before the scythe. You came for my child, he thundered. You came for my wife. Now taste the cost. He cut down 3 more assassins in rapid succession, his movements fueled by something beyond mortal strength. The surviving enemy warriors, seeing their leader dead and their cause shattered, began to break. Many threw down their weapons. Others fled toward the sea only to be hunted down by Turhan's riders or driven into the waves. The beach ran red. Smoke from burning longboats curled into the morning sky. The last desperate landing force of Yakid's remnants was annihilated. As the final cries of battle faded, Arhin returned to Asporcha's side. She had been lifted carefully onto a litter, her face ashen but her eyes still open. "It is done," she asked weakly. Arhin knelt beside her, cradling her head. "It is done, my love. They are broken. The shadow of Yakid is finished." Tears slipped down his face as he pressed his forehead to hers. "You saved me. Again, how do I repay a heart like yours?" Asporcha managed a faint smile through the pain. "Live. Win. Let our children tell stories of a sultan who loved his wife as fiercely as he loved his people." They carried her back to Bursa with all speed, the column moving as one protective shield around the litter. The people of the city lined the streets once more, this time in awed silence as their wounded Khartoum passed. In the palace, Gonya wept openly when she saw her sister-in-law carried in. Aladdin helped lay her upon the healing bed beside the very chamber where the infant had been defended hours earlier. The old healer worked urgently, removing the arrow with skilled hands and applying fresh herbs and tight bandages. "The wound is deep but clean," he said at last. "She is strong. With prayer and care, she will recover." Safia sat beside her sister, holding her hand, whispering soft words of gratitude and love. The newborn, sensing the tension, stirred in Gonya's arms until Aladdin brought him close. The child's tiny presence seemed to give Asporcha new strength. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of victory and blood, Arhen stood upon the balcony with his brother, watching the distant sea. "We have crushed the last of the traitors within and without," Aladdin said quietly. "But Shahanshah still lives. The Pope's shadow still stretches across the water." Arhen nodded, his face carved with hard resolve. "Then we prepare for the greater war. No more defending. We carry the fight to them. We free Asporcha's father. We show the world that the Osmanli rise not by conquest alone, but by justice." He turned as Asporcha was helped onto the balcony by Malhoun and Nilafar. She was pale and bandaged, yet she stood on her own feet. Arhen moved to her instantly, supporting her gently. "You should be resting." She leaned into him. "I have rested enough behind walls. My place is here with you, watching the future we bleed for." Safia stood beside them, the young girl now dressed in modest Ottoman silks, her eyes shining with quiet courage. The entire family gathered, Gonya holding the newborn, Aladdin at her side, the captain standing respectfully below. For one sacred hour, peace touched the palace. Prayers rose. Laughter, soft and precious, echoed as the infant cooed at his uncle's beard. Yet as night deepened, scouts arrived once more. Their faces were grave. "My Sultan, a massive host gathers across the straits. Shahanshah has called upon every ally. They prepare to cross in force, and they carry the papal banner at their head." Arhen looked out across the darkened sea, Asporcha's hand tight in his. The wound in her shoulder still bled slowly through the bandages, a reminder of sacrifice. The poison still lingered in his own blood. The newborn slept peacefully, unaware of the gathering storm that now threatened to swallow the young empire whole. He raised his eyes to the heavens, voice low but carrying the weight of destiny. "Let them come. We have faced fire, betrayal, and death itself. We have stood when all hope seemed lost. If they want a crusade, we will give them a legend. The wind rose off the Marmara, carrying the scent of salt and distant smoke. Torches flared along the walls of Bursa. Swords were sharpened once more. Prayers grew louder. And in the heart of the palace, a wounded sultan held his wounded wife close, both of them knowing that the greatest test of their lives, their love, and their faith still lay ahead. The long night was ending. A new and far greater dawn of war was breaking. As the stars wheeled slowly above Bursa, casting their cold silver light upon a city that refused to sleep, Sultan Arhan Sahib stood vigil at a sporcher's bedside. The oil lamps flickered softly, painting the chamber in warm gold and deep shadow. Her shoulder was heavily bandaged, the arrow wound cleaned and sewn, yet faint lines of pain still etched her beautiful face even in restless sleep. He held her hand gently, his thumb tracing slow circles over her knuckles, as if the simple touch could anchor her to this world. "You shielded me," he whispered into the quiet night. "Again and again you choose me. How did a man like me earn a woman like you?" A sporcher stirred at the sound of his voice. Her eyes opened, heavy with pain but bright with love. "Because you taught me what it means to stand," she replied softly. "Not as a princess waiting in a tower, but as your equal, as your wife." She tried to sit up. Arhan helped her, placing cushions behind her back. "Rest, my heart. The healers say the wound is clean, but your body needs time." A sporcher shook her head. "Time is a luxury we do not have. I can feel it in the air, Arhan. The storm gathers, and I will not face it lying down." Outside the chamber, the palace hummed with quiet urgency. Aladdin Sahib walked the corridors with the newborn cradled against his chest, rocking the child gently while Gonya rested nearby. The infant had grown calmer in the past hours, as though the blood of warriors ran in his veins, and he already understood the weight of his name. Malhoun and Nilafar moved like silent guardians, bringing fresh water and herbs. Young Safia sat beside Gonya, learning to fold bandages, her small hands working with surprising steadiness. "Will my sister be well?" she asked quietly. Gonya smiled through her exhaustion. "She is strong, stronger than any of us knew, just like you are learning to be." Dawn arrived with the call to prayer rolling across the city like thunder from heaven. Arhan stepped out onto the wide balcony overlooking Bursa. The wounds on his body ached, the lingering poison still sapping his strength, yet he stood tall. Below, his captains had gathered. Tarhan, armor freshly cleaned but marked with new dents. Faladios, his face grim and determined. Mustafa, Tamir Boga, Jakarta Sahib, and Altadin Sahib, all of them blooded, all of them ready. "The scouts have returned," Tarhan reported. "A host unlike any we have faced is gathering on the other side of the straits. Shahanshah has emptied his treasuries. Genoese, Venetian, Papal knights, and every Byzantine lord who still breathes, they call it a crusade. They say they will wipe the Osmanli name from the earth." Faladios spat on the ground. "Let them come. We have faced their fire, their poison, and their traitors. We still stand." Arhin's voice carried across the gathered warriors, slow and heavy with destiny. "We have bled enough behind these walls. No more waiting for the enemy to choose the hour. We carry the war to them. We cross the straits. We strike before their full strength can land. Tarhin, you will lead the vanguard across the water under cover of night. Faladios, prepare every fire ship and war galley we possess. We will burn their anchorage before they can organize. I will ride with the main force. Esportia will remain here with my brother to guard the heart of our house." From behind him came Esportia's voice, steady despite her wound. "No." She stood in the doorway, supported by Safia, cloaked and determined. "Where you ride, I ride. My father is still their prisoner. My knowledge of Constantinople's gates and weaknesses is yours to use. I will not sit here counting days while you fight for our future." Arhan turned, conflict and pride warring in his eyes. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then he nodded. "Then we ride together, as husband and wife. As Sultan and Khartan, let the enemy see what they have awakened." The preparations consumed the next 2 days like wildfire. Every blacksmith in Bursa worked without sleep. Arrows were fletched by the thousands. Ships were reinforced and loaded with pitch and Greek fire. Women prayed in the mosques while their men sharpened steel. In the palace courtyard, Arhan gathered his family one final time before departure. He held the newborn in his arms, pressing a gentle kiss to the child's forehead. "Little Osman," he whispered, "you will inherit a stronger realm than the one we leave behind. This I swear." Gonya embraced Esportia tightly. "Come back to us," she said. "Both of you." Alorden clasped his brother's forearm. "I will hold Bursa like the grave itself. No enemy will pass while I live." Safia hugged her sister, tears in her eyes. "Be careful. You are all the family I have now." Under a moonless sky, the Ottoman force began its daring crossing. Hundreds of ships and boats slipped silently across the dark water. Arhen stood at the prow of the lead vessel with a sporcher beside him, her wounded shoulder bound tight beneath her armor. The wind carried the scent of salt and coming battle. "Whatever happens," he told her, "know that I am proud to have you as my wife. You chose this path when you could have remained safe in marble halls." A sporcher leaned against him. "I chose fire. I chose you." They struck the enemy anchorage at the darkest hour before dawn. Fire ships raced forward first, drifting on the current like demons of flame. The anchored Byzantine fleet erupted in sudden panic as blazing vessels slammed into their hulls. Screams rose across the water. Great ships became funeral pyres, their sails catching like dry tinder. Tarhan led the first wave of boarding parties, leaping onto enemy decks with his elite warriors. His sword flashed in the firelight, intercepting arrows and cutting down officers before they could organize resistance. "For Arhan Saheb," he roared. "For the Khartan who shields her sultan." Palladios commanded the second assault, driving straight into the heart of the papal contingent. His duel with a heavily armored Crusader knight became legend even as it happened. Their blades clashed upon a burning deck while flames roared around them. "Your god will not save you here," the knight bellowed. Palladios answered with a savage smile. "My god does not need to. I am his sword." He feinted, spun, and drove his blade through the knight's chest in one fluid motion. The papal banners burned. Arhen and Esportia landed with the main force, carving a bloody path up the beach. Despite her injury, Esportia fought with ferocious grace, her blade claiming lives in defense of the man and the cause she had chosen. Husband and wife fought as one, back to back at times, their movements synchronized by love and shared trials. "They break," Arhen shouted as the enemy lines wavered. "Press them, drive them back." The surprise attack shattered the gathering crusade before it could fully form. Thousands of enemy soldiers fled into the hills or drowned trying to reach burning ships. Shahanshah, watching from a distant command tent, fled deeper inland with his remaining guard, his face twisted with humiliated rage. "This is not over, Arhen," he screamed into the night. "I will return with the full wrath of Christendom." As the sun rose over the smouldering anchorage, Arhen stood victorious upon the captured shore, Esportia leaning against him, both of them breathing hard. The Ottoman banners flew high above the flames. Yet even in triumph, new scouts brought grave tidings. "My Sultan, a second, larger army marches from the east. Andronikos leads them. They have bypassed our fleet and mean to strike Bursa directly while we are divided." Arhen looked toward the distant hills, then back at his wounded wife. The poison still lingered in his blood. Her arrow wound still seeped. Their child waited behind the walls. The war had become a hydra, cut off one head, and two more grew in its place. He raised his sword toward the rising sun. "Then we turn back, we defend our home, and when the moment comes, we march on Constantinople itself and end this cycle forever." Esportia nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "Together." The ships turned once more toward Bursa. The fires upon the water still burned. The wounded were tended on every deck. Prayers rose louder than the waves. And far behind them, hidden in the smoke of defeat, Shahanshah and Andronikos already plotted their next betrayal, their next alliance, their next desperate strike at the heart of the rising empire. The road ahead was longer and bloodier than ever. But Sultan Arhan Saheb, his Khartan at his side, and his house united in fire and faith, marched forward into whatever fate Allah had written. The war for the soul of nations had only just begun.